Montana Territory, June 1879. The buck raised its head, nostrils flaring in the cool mountain air. Cole Blackwood froze mid-step, rifle half raised, watching the animal through a veil of pine branches. Morning mist clung to the valley below, obscuring the twisting ribbon of Silver Creek in milky whiteness. After 3 days of tracking, he'd finally caught up to the six-pointer, the largest he'd seen this season. The deer's ears twitched, sensing something Cole couldn't. Then came the sound, faint at first, then unmistakable. Gunshots. 3 in rapid succession, echoing through the canyon. The buck bolted, crashing through the underbrush. Cole let his rifle drop, cursing under his breath. Hunting wasn't just food for him. It was the quiet, the solitude, the temporary peace from memories that haunted him. Now that peace was shattered. He stood still, listening. The shots had come from downstream, maybe a mile away. Probably trappers or prospectors. None of his business. He turned to head back to his cabin when another sound froze him in place. A scream. High, desperate female. Cole closed his eyes briefly. Walk away. Not your fight. Not anymore. But his body was already moving, boots finding purchase on the steep slope as he descended toward the creek. Old instincts died hard no matter how much whiskey he poured on them. The rushing water grew louder as he approached, rifle now held ready. Moving silently despite his size, Cole edged around a granite outcropping and caught his first glimpse of Silver Creek, swollen with late spring snowmelt. That's when he saw her. She was half-submerged body snagged against a fallen tree spanning the creek. At first he thought she was dead. Her skin was pale as moonlight against the dark water, her dress a torn, bloodied remnant of white silk and lace. A wedding dress. Cole scrambled down the bank, scanning the tree line for whoever had been shooting. Seeing no one, he splashed into the frigid water, cursing as it climbed past his knees, soaking through his buckskins. Up close, he could see she was young, mid-20s perhaps, with dark hair plastered across her face. Blood had turned the water around her pink, seeping from a wound in her side. But it was the mark on her exposed shoulder that made Cole's jaw tighten into a hard line. A brand. The letter T burned into her flesh, red and blistered no more than a day old. Memories flashed, unbidden plantation fields outside Richmond, the rows of men and women with marks seared into their skin, the smell of burned flesh, as Confederate officers catalogued their property. Cole shoved the memories aside and pulled the woman from the water, checking her neck for a pulse. It was there, weak, thready, but present. He stripped off his leather vest and pressed it against the bullet wound in her side, then hoisted her across his shoulders in a fireman's carry. The climb back to where he'd left his horse was brutal, the woman's unconscious weight and his own soaked clothing making each step a battle. By the time he reached the chestnut gelding tethered in a small clearing, sweat stung Cole's eyes despite the cool mountain air. "Easy, renegade," he murmured as the horse snorted at the scent of blood. Cole secured the woman as best he could across the saddle, then mounted behind her, one arm keeping her steady against his chest. He'd planned to hunt for 3 more days, but those plans were ashes now. The woman needed care, and quickly. Cole dug his heels into Renegade's flanks, steering the horse toward home, a cabin nestled in a hidden valley 2 hours' ride to the north. As they rode, Cole studied the back country for signs of pursuit. The brand told him everything he needed to know. Someone had marked her as property, and people didn't let valuable property escape without giving chase. The cabin appeared through the trees as afternoon shadows lengthened across the valley. Built of hand-hewn logs with a stone chimney, it sat on a small rise overlooking a meadow where 3 horses grazed behind a split-rail fence. Not large, but solid, like the man who'd built it. Cole dismounted carefully, cradling the woman against his chest. She hadn't stirred during the ride, her breathing shallow and uneven. The bullet wound had mostly stopped bleeding, but her skin burned with fever. He shouldered open the cabin door and carried her inside, laying her on his narrow bed. The cabin's interior was sparse but orderly. A stone fireplace with cooking hooks, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, shelves stocked with provisions, and a trunk at the foot of the bed. Rifles and a shotgun hung on pegs by the door, ammunition boxes stacked neatly beneath. Cole worked methodically, stoking the banked coals in the fireplace and setting water to boil. He gathered clean rags, a bottle of whiskey, and a wooden box containing surgical needles and catgut thread souvenirs from his time as a field medic during the war. The woman moaned softly as he cut away the sodden remains of her wedding dress. The bullet had entered her side and exited clean through missing vital organs, but taking a chunk of flesh with it. Painful but survivable, with proper care. It was the brand that concerned him more, a crude T, about 3 inches high, burned deep into her right shoulder. The skin around it was angry red and oozing, already showing signs of infection. Cole cleaned both wounds with boiled water and whiskey, his hands gentle despite their size and roughness. The woman thrashed weakly, delirious with fever, murmuring words he couldn't catch. He stitched the bullet wound, then dressed it with a poultice of yarrow and comfrey before wrapping her torso in clean bandages. For the brand, he applied a salve of honey and herbs learned from the Blackfoot during his first years in the territory. Finally, he covered her with blankets and placed a cool cloth on her forehead. As daylight faded, Cole built up the fire and lit an oil lamp. He pulled a chair beside the bed and settled in for a long night, a rifle across his knees and a mug of black coffee in his scarred hands. In the flickering lamplight, Cole studied the woman's face. Beneath the dirt and bruises was a beauty that spoke of fine breeding, high cheekbones, a straight nose, full lips, now cracked with dehydration. Her hands, though scraped and dirty, showed no calluses from labor. A woman of wealth, then, which made the brand all the more disturbing. The long night passed, with Cole periodically changing the cloth on her forehead and coaxing water between her lips. Sometime before dawn, her fever broke, and she fell into a deeper, healing sleep. Cole moved to his bedroll on the floor, rifle still within reach, and allowed himself a few hours of troubled rest. He woke to the sound of a knife being drawn from its sheath. Cole's eyes snapped open, his body instantly alert. The woman stood over him, his own hunting knife clutched in white-knuckled hands, her eyes wide with terror and determination. She wore his spare shirt, the oversized garment hanging to her knees. "Don't move," she said, voice raw but steady. "I'll use this if I have to." Cole remained motionless, assessing her stance. She held the knife inexpertly, but desperation made even the untrained dangerous. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "if I'd wanted to harm you, I'd have done it while you were unconscious for the past 18 hours. Confusion flickered across her face, followed by pain, as her wounded side protested her upright position. She swayed slightly, but kept the knife pointed at him. "Where am I? Who are you?" "My cabin about 20 miles north of Silver Creek," Cole replied evenly. "Name's Cole Blackwood. Found you half dead in the creek yesterday. Bullet wound in your side and that brand on your shoulder." At the mention of the brand, her left hand instinctively moved to her right shoulder, feeling the bandage there. The movement threw her off balance, and she staggered. Cole was on his feet in an instant, catching her before she fell. The knife clattered to the floor as she gasped in pain. "Easy now," he murmured, helping her to the bed. You lost a fair amount of blood, and that wound needs time to heal. She looked up at him, wariness battling with exhaustion in her eyes. Why did you help me? Cole stepped back, giving her space. I saw someone bleeding and drowning. Seemed reason enough. You don't know me. You don't know what I've done who's looking for me. No, Cole agreed, turning to stoke the fire. And I don't need to. You were bleeding. That was enough. He moved to the stove and ladled stew from a pot into a wooden bowl. You should eat something. Build your strength. She accepted the bowl cautiously, her hands trembling slightly. After a hesitant first taste, hunger overcame suspicion, and she ate with the desperation of someone who hadn't seen food in days. Cole poured coffee for them both, then settled back in his chair, giving her time. When she finished eating, he asked, You got a name? She studied him for a long moment, as if weighing how much to trust him. Sarah, she finally said. Sarah Hargrove. Cole nodded. Well, Miss Hargrove, whoever put that bullet in you might still be looking. And whoever branded you like cattle definitely will be. Fear flashed in her eyes, but she lifted her chin defiantly. You needn't concern yourself. I'll be gone as soon as I can walk properly. And go where exactly? Cole asked. Nearest town is Pine Ridge, 40 miles south. Next one's Fort Laramie, over 100 miles east. Mountains and wilderness in every other direction. Sarah's shoulders slumped slightly as the reality of her situation sank in. I can't stay here. I'll only bring trouble to your door. Trouble and I are old acquaintances, Cole said dryly. He reached for his tobacco pouch and began rolling a cigarette, his fingers moving with practiced precision. Rest today. Tomorrow's soon enough to make decisions. A silence fell between them, broken only by the popping of the fire and the distant call of a hawk outside. Cole lit his cigarette and watched the smoke curl toward the rafters, giving Sarah space with her thoughts. Finally she spoke again, her voice quieter. The men who did this, they'll kill anyone who helps me. Cole's weathered face revealed nothing but his eyes, a cold, pale blue, that reminded Sarah of winter ice hardened slightly. I reckon we all die sometime, Miss Hargrove, he said, exhaling a stream of smoke. Question is what we do between now and then. Before Sarah could respond, Cole stiffened his head, turning toward the window. Someone's coming, he said, rising in one fluid motion and reaching for his rifle. Single rider, moving fast. Sarah's face drained of what little color it had. They've found me. Cole moved to the window, staying to one side as he peered out. After a moment, his posture relaxed slightly. It's all right. It's Running Wolf. Running Wolf, Blackfoot Scout, friend of mine. Cole hung his rifle back on its peg, but kept his revolver on his hip as he opened the door. The man who rode into the clearing was tall and lean, with long black hair braided with eagle feathers. He wore buckskins similar to Cole's, but adorned with intricate beadwork. His face, weathered by sun and wind, bore the lines of a man in his 50s, but he moved with the fluid grace of someone half his age. Running Wolf dismounted in a single graceful motion and approached the cabin. He spoke to Cole in a mixture of English and Blackfoot, his voice low and urgent. Cole listened intently, his expression darkening. Sarah watched from the doorway, struggling to follow their conversation. She caught fragments, riders, searching. Reward enough to send ice through her veins. When Running Wolf finished speaking, Cole nodded grimly. Go inside, he said to Sarah. Now. She obeyed, retreating to the bed. Cole and Running Wolf entered the latter's dark eyes, fixing on Sarah with keen interest. This is the woman, Running Wolf asked. Cole nodded. Sarah Hargrove. This is Running Wolf. He brings news you should hear. Running Wolf studied her for a moment, his gaze lingering on her shoulder where the brand lay hidden beneath her borrowed shirt. The white eyes seek you, he said finally. 6 men with rifles led by one they call the Hangman. They offer gold for your return. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Birch, she whispered. Wallace Birch. Cole's eyebrows rose slightly. You know him. Every woman who's ever tried to run knows Birch, she said bitterly. He's Thornton's personal hunter. Thornton, Cole exchanged a glance with Running Wolf. Thaddeus Thornton, the railroad man, Sarah nodded her hand unconsciously, moving to her branded shoulder. The T is his mark. He owns me. At least that's what he believes. Cole's jaw tightened. No man owns another. Not in this territory. Not while I draw breath. You don't understand, Sarah said, desperation creeping into her voice. Thornton has judges in his pocket, politicians at his beck and call. The brand is just his way of making it clear, I'm his property to be recovered at any cost. How did you come to wear his brand? Running Wolf asked, his tone neutral, but his eyes compassionate. Sarah looked down at her hands, now clenched in her lap. My father owned a small gold mine near Bitterroot Valley. Thornton wanted it, but my father refused to sell. Then the accidents started. Equipment failures, tunnel collapses. Her voice hardened. When those didn't convince him, Thornton had my father killed, made it look like a mining accident. Cole had heard similar stories before. Men like Thornton saw the Montana Territory as their personal empire, to be built on the bones of smaller men if necessary. The mine passed to me as my father's only living heir, Sarah continued. Thornton changed tactics. He courted me, proposed marriage. When I refused, she shuddered. He took what he wanted anyway. Had me abducted, branded like an animal. Said he'd marry me regardless of my wishes, and the mine would be his legally. You escaped, Cole observed. A flicker of fierce pride crossed Sarah's face. I killed one of his men with his own knife when he came to prepare me for the ceremony. Took this from his pocket. She reached into her torn bodice and withdrew a folded piece of paper. It's a map to the mine's main shaft. There's a new vein my father discovered before he died, richer than anything Thornton knows about. Cole took the paper, studying the crude map. This is what he really wants. Sarah nodded. The brand is his way of showing ownership of me and everything that belongs to me. The wedding was to make it legal in the eyes of the law. Running Wolf moved to the window, peering out at the lengthening shadows. The hangman and his men crossed Silver Creek at midday, he said. They will reach this valley by tomorrow. Cole rolled up the map and handed it back to Sarah. Then we have decisions to make. I'll leave, Sarah said immediately. Now tonight, I won't bring this down on you. And go where? Cole asked again, more forcefully this time. Wounded on foot, in unfamiliar country, you wouldn't last 2 days. I can't stay. Birch will find an empty cabin, Cole interrupted. Running Wolf will make sure of that. The Blackfoot scout nodded. I will lead them north into the high country. A woman and a white man traveled that way, I will tell them. It will buy you 2 days, perhaps 3. Sarah looked between the 2 men, confusion evident on her face. Why would you do this? You don't know me. You owe me nothing. Cole moved to the trunk at the foot of his bed and opened it. From inside, he withdrew a worn leather bundle. Unwrapping it carefully, he revealed a U.S. Marshal's badge and a folded piece of paper, a wanted poster with a crude drawing of a man's face. The name beneath it read, Cole, the Ghost Blackwood. I was a hunter once, too, Cole said quietly. Tracked men across 5 territories. Some deserved it, some didn't. I didn't always ask which was which. He refolded the poster. Been trying to balance those scales ever since. Sarah stared at the badge. You were a lawman. After the war. Cole nodded. Turned in my star 5 years ago. Some lines I wouldn't cross anymore. Running Wolf moved toward the door. I must go. The hangman is no fool. If I am absent too long, he will suspect. Cole clasped the scout's forearm in a warrior's grip. Watch yourself. Birch has a reputation for cruelty. Running Wolf's smile was cold. As do I, my friend. He looked at Sarah. Rest heal. Cole Blackwood is a man of honor, despite what his ghosts tell him. With that he was gone, slipping into the gathering darkness like a shadow. Cole secured the door and began gathering supplies. Ammunition, dried meat, medical supplies, packing them efficiently into saddlebags. What are you doing? Sarah asked. Getting ready, Cole replied without looking up. Come morning, we're leaving too. Unless you prefer Birch's company. Cole checked the action on his revolver before holstering it. Running Wolf will buy us time, but this cabin isn't safe anymore. I know a place high up in the Bitterroots where we can lie low until you're healed enough to travel properly. As Sarah watched him work, conflicting emotions playing across her face. Why are you helping me? The truth this time. Cole paused, then set down the knife he'd been sharpening. For a long moment, he was silent, staring at his scarred hands. During the war, he said finally, his voice low, I saw men brand other human beings like they were livestock. Swore then I'd never stand by and watch it happen again. He looked up, meeting her gaze directly. That mark on your shoulder, that's reason enough. Before Sarah could respond, a sound outside froze them, both horses approaching, moving slowly. Cole extinguished the lamp with a quick breath and moved to the window, rifle in hand. In the fading twilight, he could make out a lone figure on horseback, approaching from the south trail. Birch, Sarah whispered, fear evident in her voice. Cole shook his head. Too soon. And Birch wouldn't come alone. He strained to see in the gathering darkness. The rider sat tall in the saddle, a long duster coat flapping around his legs. As he drew closer, moonlight glinted off something on his chest, a star-shaped badge. It's Wallace Birch, all right, Cole said grimly, recognizing the infamous bounty hunter. And he's wearing a U.S. Marshal's badge. That's impossible, Sarah hissed. Birch is Thornton's man, not a lawman. Cole's expression hardened. Badges can be bought same as judges. He moved to the door, checking that his revolver was loose in its holster. Stay inside, out of sight. Let me handle this. He'll recognize you. Counting on it, Cole said. We have history, the hangman and I. With that, he stepped out onto the porch, closing the door firmly behind him. In the moonlight, Cole Blackwood stood tall and unafraid, watching as one of the most feared bounty hunters in the Montana Territory dismounted and approached his cabin. The moment had a grim inevitability to it, like two storm fronts destined to collide. Sarah, peering through a crack in the shutters, felt her heart hammering against her ribs. Whatever happened in the next few minutes would determine both their fates. And from the look on Cole's face, he knew it too. The hangman stopped 10 paces from the porch, his gaunt figure silhouetted against the moonlit clearing. A lifetime of hunting men had whittled Wallace Birch down to sinew and bone, his face a leathery mask beneath the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat. The badge on his chest caught the moonlight, a U.S. Marshal's star polished to a high gleam. Well now, Birch drawled, his voice dry as autumn leaves. "If it ain't the ghost himself. Heard you were dead." Cole leaned against the porch post, deliberately casual, though his hand remained close to his holstered Colt. "Heard the same about you after that business in Cheyenne." Birch's thin lips twisted into what might have been a smile. "Rumors of my demise were premature." His pale eyes scanned the cabin behind Cole. "You alone up here, Blackwood. Just me and the whiskey," Cole replied evenly. "What brings a man like you to my doorstep, wearing a badge that don't belong to him?" Birch's hand moved to touch the star. "Oh, this is legitimate. Special appointment from Judge Howell himself. Seems there's been a murder down Bitterroot Way. Young woman killed her escort and fled. Dangerous, they say." "That's so." Cole's expression revealed nothing. "Must be quite the woman to bring the famous hangman out of retirement." $2,500 says she is." Birch's eyes narrowed. "Railroad man named Thornton's mighty eager to have her back. Says she's his fiancée gone mad with grief after her daddy's passing." Cole gave a derisive snort. "Sounds like a tale from one of them dime novels." "Maybe so." Birch glanced pointedly at the two horses in Cole's corral, one more than a man living alone would need. "Mind if I water my horse? Been a long ride." "Help yourself." Cole nodded toward the water trough. "Then I'd appreciate you moving on. I value my privacy." Birch led his horse to the trough, positioning himself to see both Cole and the cabin windows. "Funny thing," he said conversationally. "I crossed paths with a Blackfoot scout earlier today. Said he saw a wounded woman heading north with a white man." He paused, watching Cole's reaction. "Yet here, I find fresh tracks leading to your doorstep, and you're saddling two horses." Inside the cabin, Sarah's pulse quickened. Through the crack in the shutters, she could see the two men squaring off, tension crackling between them like heat lightning before a storm. "Been hunting," Cole said flatly. "Heading out again tomorrow. Mind if I look inside?" Birch's hand rested casually on his holstered revolver. "Just to ease my conscience." Cole straightened his posture, subtly shifting. Anyone who knew him would recognize the danger in that movement. "Actually, I do mind. Badge or no badge, you don't enter a man's home without invitation in this territory." The two men stared at each other, years of violence and bloodshed stretching between them like a chasm. In another life, they had been cut from the same cloth hunters of men dealers in death. Now they stood on opposite sides of a line Cole had drawn years ago. "You always were, stubborn ghost." Birch's voice hardened. "I respected that about you, so I'll be plain. I know she's here. I can smell the medicine you've used on her wounds. I can see the extra coffee cup on your table through that window." Cole didn't blink. "Then you also know what'll happen if you try to take her." A tense silence followed, broken only by the soft snorting of horses and the distant call of a nightbird. Sarah held her breath, hand clutching the knife Cole had left for her. Finally, Birch's posture relaxed slightly. "Always did wonder which of us was faster," he said, almost regretfully. "But not tonight, I think." He remounted his horse with fluid grace that belied his age. "I've got 5 men camped at Silver Creek. By noon tomorrow, they'll be here." He gathered his reins. "Whatever she's promised you, Blackwood, it ain't worth dying for." "Maybe not," Cole agreed, his voice level. "But some things are." Birch studied him for a long moment, then tipped his hat. "I'll see you tomorrow, then." He turned his horse and rode slowly back the way he'd come, disappearing into the darkness like a wraith. Cole remained on the porch until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely. Only then did he return inside, finding Sarah standing in the middle of the room, knife in hand, face pale but determined. "He knows I'm here," she said. Cole nodded, moving quickly to gather their supplies. "He's alone for now, but he wasn't bluffing about the others. We need to be gone before first light." "He'll follow," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her fear. "Counting on it." Cole checked his rifle, then began extinguishing the lamps. "But we won't be where he expects." Sarah watched him work, confusion evident on her face. "I don't understand." Running Wolf told Birch we were heading north. Cole tossed her a set of men's clothing buckskins similar to his own. "We're going east, then south, toward Fort Laramie." "The fort?" Sarah's eyes widened. "But that's federal territory. If Birch really has a marshal's badge—" "He does," Cole interrupted. "But it's not worth the tin it's stamped on. Judge Howell's in Thornton's pocket, same as half the territory officials. But the fort commander answers to Washington, not local judges." He nodded toward the clothes. "Those'll be big on you, but they'll have to do. We ride in 30 minutes. As Sarah changed, wincing as the movement pulled at her stitches, Cole prepared their escape. He packed only essentials, ammunition, dried meat, medical supplies, and a small pouch of gold dust, the accumulated wealth of 5 years' solitude. Outside, he saddled Renegade and a smaller mare he called Willow, tying their supplies across both mounts. The night had deepened, clouds now obscuring the moon, providing the cover they would need. When Sarah emerged from the cabin, Cole barely recognized her. With her hair tucked beneath a wide-brimmed hat and her slender frame hidden beneath buckskins and a wool coat, she could pass for a young man at a distance. "Good," Cole nodded approvingly. "Less conspicuous this way." "I've never ridden astride," Sarah admitted, eyeing Willow uncertainly. "Time to learn." Cole helped her mount, noting the grimace of pain she tried to hide. "We'll go slow at first, but we need to put miles behind us before dawn." With a last look at the cabin that had been his refuge for 5 years, Cole mounted Renegade and led them into the forest away from the main trail. They rode in silence, the only sound the soft thudding of hooves on pine-needled earth and the occasional call of a night bird. Sarah watched Cole navigate by starlight, moving with the confidence of a man who knew every tree and rock of this wilderness. Despite the pain in her side and the fear that had been her constant companion for weeks, she felt something she hadn't expected: hope. As they crested a ridge just before dawn, Cole halted. Below them stretched a vast expanse of wilderness, rolling hills giving way to jagged mountains to the east, their peaks still crowned with snow despite the June warmth. "Beautiful," Sarah murmured momentarily, forgetting their circumstances. Cole nodded, his eyes scanning the terrain with a hunter's precision. "Also dangerous. Territory between here and Fort Laramie is contested ground. Blackfoot to the north, Crow to the south, white settlers pushing in from the east." He pointed to a distant line of green winding through the landscape. "Yellowstone River. We follow it east 3 days, then cut south toward the fort." Sarah studied the vastness before them, the enormity of their journey sinking in. "Will we make it?" Cole's weathered face gave nothing away. "If we're smart, fast, and lucky." He adjusted his hat against the first rays of sunlight cresting the mountains. 2 out of 3 might do it. By midday, they had descended from the high country into a rolling landscape of pine forests interspersed with meadows vibrant with wildflowers. They stopped briefly at a stream to rest the horses and drink, Cole constantly scanning their back trail for signs of pursuit. "You've done this before," Sarah observed, watching him check his rifle for what seemed the 100th time. "Running, I mean." Cole's mouth tightened. "Not running. Hunting." He holstered his revolver after spinning the cylinder. "Difference is knowing whether you're the wolf or the deer." "And what are we now?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Neither, we're wolves being hunted by wolves. He handed her a strip of dried venison. Eat, we still have ground to cover. Sarah chewed the tough meat, studying her unlikely protector. In another life, Cole Blackwood might have been the one hunting her for Thornton's bounty. What had changed him? What had turned the ghost into a recluse who would risk his life for a stranger? "Why did they call you that?" she asked suddenly. "The ghost." Cole stiffened almost imperceptibly. "War name," he said shortly. "Best left there. Birch seemed to know you well. We rode together after the war." Cole's tone discouraged further questions, but Sarah persisted. "As marshals. As hunters." Cole's eyes met hers, cold and hard as river stones. "Men like us, we were useful once the fighting stopped. Skills most folks don't have and don't want. Tracking, killing." He looked away. Government had bounties on deserters, outlaws, renegade Indians. We collected. Sarah absorbed this, putting together pieces of the puzzle that was Cole Blackwood. What changed? For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then so quietly, she almost missed it. "I saw my reflection one day." Didn't recognize the man looking back. Before she could respond, Cole stiffened, head tilting as he listened. "Riders?" he said, reaching for his rifle. "4, maybe 5. Sarah felt fear clutch at her throat. "Birch!" "Too soon." Cole frowned. "Unless—" His eyes narrowed. "Mount up, now." They were back on their horses and moving within seconds, Cole leading them into a dense stand of pines that offered concealment. Through gaps in the trees, Sarah caught glimpses of the approaching riders, 5 men in trail-worn clothing, rifles across their saddles, moving with purpose. "Birch's men," Cole murmured. "He split his party, sent half to circle ahead, while he kept us occupied." There was a grudging respect in his voice. "Smart play." The riders stopped at the stream where Cole and Sarah had rested minutes before. One dismounted, crouching to examine the ground. "Tracker," Cole whispered. "Good one by the look of him." The man stood pointing in their direction. "Fresh tracks. 2 horses, one carrying extra weight. They're close." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. Beside her, Cole silently drew his revolver. "If they find us," she whispered. "They won't take you alive," he promised. "Nor me." The lead rider, a broad-shouldered man with a red beard, spat tobacco juice onto the ground. "Fan out. They can't have gone far. $500 extra to whoever spots them first." The men separated 3, heading directly toward the pine stand where Cole and Sarah concealed themselves. "Stay here," Cole breathed, sliding from his saddle. "If shooting starts, ride east. Don't stop till you reach the river." He pressed a folded map into her hand. "Fort's here. Ask for Captain McAllister. Tell him Cole Blackwood sent you." Before Sarah could protest, Cole slipped away, moving through the underbrush with preternatural silence. She watched, barely breathing, as he circled behind the approaching riders. What happened next unfolded with the terrible precision of a well-rehearsed dance. Cole emerged from the trees, 30 yards behind the bounty hunters, revolver raised. "Looking for someone!" The men whirled hands, dropping to their weapons. The first man managed to clear leather before Cole fired a single shot that took him through the chest. The second got off a wild shot that splintered bark near Cole's head before a return bullet found his throat. The third bounty hunter was smarter. Instead of drawing on Cole, he wheeled his horse and charged toward the trees where Sarah hid. Cole's next shot caught the man's mount in the flank, sending horse and rider crashing to the ground in a tangle of thrashing limbs. The remaining 2 men had taken cover behind rocks at the stream's edge, rifles now trained on Cole's position. A shot cracked past his ear as he ducked behind a thick pine trunk. "That's far enough, mister," the red-bearded leader shouted. "We ain't got quarrel with you. We just want the woman." "She's not for sale," Cole called back, thumbing fresh cartridges into his revolver. 2500 says otherwise. Walk away. Now you live to see sunset." Cole's response was another shot that sent the red-bearded man diving for better cover. In the pine thicket, Sarah watched the standoff with growing horror. 3 men down in as many seconds, Cole Blackwood was everything the stories said he was. But now, he was pinned down, outnumbered because of her. The fallen rider whose horse Cole had shot was regaining his feet, drawing a knife from his boot as he stumbled toward the thicket. He hadn't seen Sarah yet, but it was only a matter of moments before he did. Sarah's hand closed around the revolver Cole had insisted she carry. She had never fired a gun before yesterday, when Cole had given her the briefest of lessons during their night ride. "Point and squeeze," he'd said. "Let the gun do the work." The bounty hunter was 20 feet away now, knife gleaming dully in the filtered sunlight. Behind him, rifle fire continued to exchange between Cole and the remaining men. 15 feet. 10. Sarah raised the revolver, her hand shaking violently. The man saw her, then his bearded face splitting into a yellow-toothed grin. "Well, looky here," he chuckled, advancing steadily. "Miss Hargrove herself, all trussed up like a boy. Thornton's gonna be mighty pleased." Sarah squeezed the trigger. The gun bucked in her hand, the report deafening in the enclosed space. The man staggered, a look of comical surprise crossing his face, as a red stain blossomed on his shirt front. He took another step toward her, then collapsed to his knees before toppling face first into the pine needles. Sarah stared at the body, then at the smoking gun in her hand. A strange numbness spread through her, as if she were watching someone else's hands, someone else's life. The rifle fire had stopped. In the sudden silence, Sarah heard hoofbeats, the remaining bounty hunters retreating. Then Cole was beside her, gently taking the revolver from her rigid fingers. "You all right?" he asked, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. Sarah couldn't look away from the dead man. "I killed him," she whispered. "You did what you had to." Cole quickly checked her for injuries. "Can you ride?" The question penetrated her shock. Yes, I think so." "Good, because those 2 will be back with Birch and the rest." Cole helped her mount Willow. "We need to move. Now." As they rode away from the clearing, Sarah glanced back at the bodies growing smaller in the distance. In that moment, something shifted inside her, a hardening like steel being tempered in fire. She had taken a life. There would be no going back to the woman she had been before. Cole led them east at a punishing pace, pushing the horses as hard as he dared over the rough terrain. By late afternoon, dark clouds had gathered on the horizon, promising a summer storm. "We'll stop here," Cole announced, as they reached a rocky outcropping overlooking a small valley. "Storm will cover our tracks better than anything we could manage." They made a cold camp beneath an overhang of rock. The horses tethered nearby. As rain began to patter against the stone above them, Cole tended to Sarah's wounds, replacing the blood-soaked bandage on her side. "Stitches are holding," he observed. "You're tougher than you look, Miss Hargrove." Sarah winced as he applied a fresh poultice. "Sarah," she corrected. "After what we've been through, Miss Hargrove seems rather formal." A faint smile touched Cole's lips. "Sarah, then." He secured the bandage and moved back to give her space. "You should rest. Tomorrow will be harder." Sarah pulled his spare coat tighter around her shoulders, the buckskins doing little to ward off the evening chill. "I keep thinking about that man," she admitted. "The one I shot." Cole nodded, understanding in his eyes. "First one's the hardest. Does it get easier?" "It shouldn't." Cole's voice was flat. "Day it gets easy is the day you become something else." Lightning flashed briefly, illuminating the small shelter. In that instant, Sarah saw something in Cole's face, a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion, a burden carried too long alone. "How many?" she asked quietly. Cole didn't pretend to misunderstand. 27 confirmed, he said after a long pause. "During the war and after, maybe more." He stared out at the rain. Stopped counting eventually. Stopped mattering who they were or why. "Is that when you quit being a marshal?" Cole pulled a worn tobacco pouch from his pocket and began rolling a cigarette, his scarred fingers moving with practiced precision. "Partly. Last straw was a homesteader up near Butte, man named Collins." He lit the cigarette, the brief flare casting shadows across his face. "Judge said he'd murdered his neighbor over a land dispute. Sent me to bring him in." Sarah watched him, sensing the weight of the story he was sharing. Found him working, his field wife and young daughter watching from the porch. Cole exhaled a stream of smoke. Man surrendered peaceful-like. Kept saying there'd been a mistake, that his neighbor was alive and well. A muscle twitched in Cole's jaw. Brought him in anyway. Judge had him hanged the next morning. He was innocent. Neighbor showed up 2 days later, very much alive. Land dispute had been settled weeks before. Cole's eyes were distant. "Turned in my badge that day. Headed into the mountains, built my cabin. Figured the world was better off without the ghost." Sarah absorbed this understanding now, why Cole had chosen to help her, a stranger fleeing powerful men with legal authority, however corrupted. "What about you?" Cole asked, changing the subject. "Your father's mine. Why is Thornton so fixated on it? Gold mines are plentiful in these territories." Sarah hesitated, then reached into her shirt and withdrew the folded map she'd shown him earlier. "It's not just any gold. My father discovered a new vein, richest he'd ever seen. But there's something else." She unfolded the map, pointing to notations in the margin. "See these markings? There's a natural tunnel system beneath the mine that leads north across the Canadian border." Cole studied the map, understanding dawning. "Smuggling route." Sarah nodded. "Perfect for moving gold without paying federal taxes or tariffs. Worth millions to someone with the right connections." Her voice hardened. "My father discovered Thornton was already using the older tunnels to smuggle Chinese laborers south and opium north. That's why Thornton had him killed." Cole looked at her with new respect. "And the brand? Why mark you like that if he planned to marry you anyway?" Sarah's hand unconsciously moved to her shoulder. "Control," she said bitterly. "A message that I belong to him, that I can never escape." The wedding was just for legal ownership of the mine. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the steady drumming of rain and occasional rumble of thunder. Despite their dire circumstances, Sarah felt a strange sense of peace in that moment, the first time she'd felt safe since her father's death. "Get some sleep," Cole said, eventually moving to the edge of their shelter to keep watch. "I'll wake you in a few hours." Sarah settled onto the bedroll he'd laid out, exhaustion overtaking her despite the hard ground and persistent ache in her side. Just before sleep claimed her, she murmured, "Thank you, Cole." He didn't respond, but in the darkness his expression softened. Dawn broke clear and cold after the storm, the landscape washed clean, glittering with moisture. Cole roused Sarah before first light, his face grim. Riders, he said, simply handing her a tin cup of coffee. Mile back, moving slow. Tracking us. Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she took the cup. Birch. Can't tell yet. 6 of them well armed. Cole was already saddling the horses. We need to move. They rode east as the sun climbed following game trails through increasingly rugged country. By mid-morning, they reached a wide, fast-flowing river, the Yellowstone, Cole explained. They would follow it east for 2 days before turning south toward Fort Laramie. River's too high to cross here, Cole observed, studying the churning waters. We'll have to find a ford downstream. They rode along the riverbank for several hours, the terrain gradually shifting from pine forest to open grassland, dotted with cottonwoods and willow thickets. The day grew warm, insects buzzing lazily in the summer heat. Just past noon, they crested a small rise, and Cole reined in sharply, throwing up a hand in warning. Sarah pulled alongside him, following his gaze. In the valley below, near a bend in the river, stood a small settlement, perhaps a dozen rough-hewn cabins clustered around what appeared to be a trading post. Horses were tethered outside, and smoke rose from several chimneys. Riverbend, Cole said, naming the outpost. Last civilized stop before Fort Laramie. Is it safe? Sarah asked. Cole's expression was non-committal. Safer than the open country with Birch on our trail. We need supplies information. He studied the settlement through narrowed eyes. Keep your hat low, speak as little as possible. Far as anyone knows, you're my nephew from back east, learning the country. They approached Riverbend cautiously, Cole alert for any sign of danger. The trading post was a long, low building with a covered porch, several men lounging outside on rough-hewn benches. They watched Cole and Sarah with the wary interest of frontier folk, curious but not overtly hostile. Cole dismounted outside the trading post, helping Sarah down with a murmured reminder to keep her head down. Inside the post was dim after the bright sunlight, smelling of tobacco leather and coffee. A broad-shouldered man with a magnificent silver beard stood behind the counter, weighing out flour for a customer. "Be with you in a moment," he called without looking up. Cole positioned himself with his back to the wall, a habit of long standing, while Sarah browsed shelves stocked with the necessities of frontier life: ammunition, tools, canned goods, rolls of fabric. When the other customer departed, Cole approached the counter. "Need supplies," he said, laying out a small pouch of gold dust. "Coffee, ammunition, jerky. Any grain for the horses." The proprietor eyed the gold, then Cole. "Might have some. You passing through or staying?" "Passing through," Cole replied. "Heading east, then south." The silver-bearded man nodded sagely. "Fort Laramie way." When Cole didn't deny it, he continued, "Road's been busy lately. Had a federal marshal through here yesterday asking questions about a woman fugitive." Sarah froze by the shelves, her back to the conversation. "That so?" Cole's voice betrayed nothing. "What kind of questions?" "Whether she'd been seen. Said she was wanted for murder theft." The proprietor leaned forward conspiratorially. "Said there's 2,500 in it for anyone who spots her." "Must be quite the woman," Cole observed, echoing his words to Birch. "Apparently." The proprietor began gathering Cole's supplies. "Marshall seemed mighty interested in a cabin up near Silver Creek. Your direction, if I recall." Cole's expression remained neutral. "Lot of cabins in these mountains." "True enough." The man measured coffee beans into a paper sack. "Peculiar thing, though. Marshall had 5 men with him, hard cases all. Mighty large posse for one woman." He glanced meaningfully at Sarah's back. "Your nephew's awful small for trail riding." Cole's hand moved imperceptibly closer to his holstered revolver. "Growth spurts coming any day now." The proprietor's eyes crinkled. Expect so. He finished packing the supplies and pushed them across the counter. That'll be 2 pinches of dust. Cole measured out the gold, aware that the price was fairer than he'd expected. As he gathered the supplies, the proprietor leaned close. "Back door leads to the stables," he murmured. "Might be a quicker way out, considering." Cole gave him a sharp look. "Considering what?" "Considering there's 2 hard-looking men just rode in, asking about a fella traveling with a young boy." The proprietor's straightened voice returning to normal volume. "Anything else you'll be needing today?" "That covers it," Cole said, gathering the supplies. "Much obliged." He moved casually to where Sarah stood, speaking quietly. "We've got trouble. Head for the back door now." They moved toward the rear of the store, Cole's hand resting on his revolver. Just as they reached the back hallway, the front door swung open. Through a gap in the shelving, Cole caught a glimpse of 2 men entering, one tall and lean, the other stocky, with a distinctive red beard. The survivors from yesterday's ambush. The proprietor engaged them loudly, buying precious seconds, as Cole and Sarah slipped through the back door into a small stable yard. 3 horses were already saddled, including their own. "Friend back there," Cole murmured quickly, securing their supplies. "Not everyone agrees with Thornton's methods," came a voice from the shadows. An old man emerged, his face weathered by sun and wind to the texture of saddle leather. "Name's Jenkins. Used to work Hargrove's mine before Thornton took over." He handed Cole a folded paper. "Marshall left this with instructions to watch for you." Cole unfolded the paper, a wanted poster, with his own face crudely rendered, the words "murderer" and "armed and dangerous" emblazoned across the top. "500 for you, 2,500 for the woman," Jenkins said. "Though they don't know it's a woman they're looking for yet." "They will soon enough," Cole said, grimly crumpling the poster. Shouting erupted from inside the trading post. Their time had run out. "East Trail leads to a river crossing," Jenkins said hurriedly. "Not the main ford, locals only know it. You can be halfway to Canada before they figure out where you've gone." "Much obliged," Cole said, helping Sarah mount before swinging into his own saddle. "Your father was a good man, Miss Hargrove," Jenkins said, his rheumy eyes fixed on Sarah. "What Thornton did to him to you ain't right. You get to Fort Laramie, find Captain McAllister. He's one of the few straight arrows left." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise at being recognized. "How did you—" "Got eyes, don't I?" Jenkins smiled sadly. "You're the spitting image of your mother. Now go before those boys inside figure out what's what." They rode out the back way, keeping the buildings between themselves and the front of the trading post. As they reached the edge of the settlement, a shout went up behind them, followed by the crack of a rifle shot. "Ride," Cole urged, spurring Renegade into a gallop. Sarah followed, bent low over Willow's neck, as more shots rang out behind them. They thundered down the East Trail hooves, kicking up clods of earth as they raced away from Riverbend. The path led them through a stand of cottonwoods, then down a shallow ravine toward the river. Behind them, Cole could hear pursuers giving chase, but the head start and local knowledge might be enough. The trail descended sharply, revealing a stretch of river where a gravel bar created a natural ford, the water running shallow over smooth stones. Without hesitation, Cole led them into the crossing, water spraying as the horses picked their way across. Halfway across, disaster struck. Willow stepped into a hidden hole, stumbling violently. Sarah cried out as she was thrown forward, barely keeping her seat. The mare recovered, but now limped badly, struggling to cross the remaining distance. "Keep going!" Cole shouted, wheeling Renegade around to cover their retreat. He drew his rifle, sighting on the ravine where their pursuers would appear at any moment. Sarah urged the injured Willow forward, reaching the far bank just as two riders appeared on the ridge above the river. Cole fired twice in rapid succession, forcing them to dive for cover. It bought precious seconds as he backed Renegade across the ford, still facing the opposite bank. "She can't run," Sarah said urgently as Cole reached her, nodding at Willow's obviously damaged leg. "The supplies, leave them," Cole ordered, already transferring essential items to Renegade's saddlebags. "You'll ride with me." More riders appeared on the ridge now, including the red-bearded man. Rifle fire cracked around them as Cole helped Sarah mount behind him on Renegade. The big gelding snorted at the extra weight, but stood firm. "Hold tight," Cole said, and spurred Renegade away from the river, heading into a dense forest that offered their only hope of cover. Bullets whined past them as they galloped into the trees, Sarah's arms wrapped tightly around Cole's waist. Behind them, they could hear their pursuers crossing the ford, closing the distance. "They're gaining!" Sarah shouted over the thunder of hooves. Cole didn't respond, focusing on guiding Renegade through the trees at dangerous speed. The horse was strong, but the double burden would tell eventually. They needed a plan, and quickly. The forest began to thin, giving way to a vast open plain that offered no concealment. Cole reined in at the edge of the trees, quickly assessing their options. "We can't outrun them in the open," he said, breathing hard, "not double-mounted." Sarah's face was pale, but determined. "What do we do?" Before Cole could answer, the sound of distant hoofbeats changed, not pursuing anymore, but approaching from the east across the plain. Many riders moving fast. Cole raised his spyglass, focusing on the dust cloud. What he saw made his blood run cold. "Blackfoot war party," he said grimly. "At least 20 braves armed and painted." "Hostile?" Sarah asked, her voice steady despite the fear evident in her eyes. "To everyone in these parts." Cole collapsed the spyglass. "We're caught between Birch and a Blackfoot war council." The hoofbeats behind them grew louder. Their pursuers would reach them within minutes. Ahead, the Blackfoot warriors had spotted them changing course to intercept. "What now?" Sarah asked, her voice remarkably calm, given their dire situation. Cole checked his weapons rifle revolver knife. Not nearly enough for what they faced. "Now," he said with grim determination, "we find out if Running Wolf's friendship extends to his less peaceful cousins." He spurred Renegade forward directly toward the approaching Blackfoot warriors, their feathered lances gleaming in the afternoon sun. Behind them, Birch and his men emerged from the forest only to rein in sharply at the sight before them, Cole Blackwood charging headlong toward a Blackfoot war party, the supposed nephew clinging to his back. "What the hell is he doing?" the red-bearded man muttered. Birch's weathered face revealed nothing as he watched the suicidal charge. "Being the ghost," he said softly. "God help anyone who gets in his way." The distance closed rapidly, Blackfoot warriors fanning out in a classic attack formation. At 50 yards, Cole raised his hand in a gesture Sarah didn't recognize. At 20 yards, he pulled Renegade to a sliding halt, dust billowing around them. The Blackfoot chief, a powerfully built man with a face painted half red, half black, raised his lance. The war party stopped as one surrounding Cole and Sarah in a circle of mounted warriors. For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then Cole spoke not in English, but in the flowing, guttural language of the Blackfoot. He gestured toward Sarah, then toward the distant figures of Birch and his men, his voice rising and falling in what seemed to be an impassioned speech. The chief listened impassively, his dark eyes unreadable. When Cole finished speaking, the chief turned to his warriors and issued a series of sharp commands. Immediately, half the war party detached, wheeling their horses toward Birch's position. The chief turned back to Cole, speaking rapidly. Cole nodded, replying in the same language. Then, to Sarah's astonishment, the chief reached out and clasped Cole's forearm in what appeared to be a gesture of respect. "What's happening?" Sarah whispered. "We've just acquired an escort," Cole replied, relief evident in his voice. "Running Wolf's cousin is the war chief. They're not fond of bounty hunters on their hunting grounds." As she watched the remaining Blackfoot warriors formed up around them, the chief gesturing for Cole to follow as they set off eastward across the plain. Behind them, Birch and his men were retreating hastily back into the forest, pursued by whooping Blackfoot braves, firing arrows that fell deliberately short, a warning, not an attack. "Will they take us to Fort Laramie?" Sarah asked, still struggling to understand the sudden reversal of their fortunes. Cole shook his head. "No. There's a Blackfoot summer camp 2 days' ride from here. We'll be safe there while you heal properly. And then," Cole's expression was unreadable, "then we figure out how to get that brand off your shoulder and Thornton off your back. Permanently." As they rode eastward with their unlikely allies, Sarah felt a curious mixture of fear and hope. The brand on her shoulder still burned, a constant reminder of Thornton's claim. But for the first time since her father's death, she dared to believe she might be free of it. Behind them, Wallace Birch watched through his spyglass as Cole Blackwood disappeared with his Blackfoot escorts. A thin smile crossed his leathery face. "Clever play, Ghost," he murmured. "But the game's just beginning." He turned to his men. "Change of plans, boys. We're heading for Bitter Creek. Need to send a wire." "To who?" the red-bearded man asked. Birch's smile widened. "To the U.S. Cavalry at Fort Laramie, about a Blackfoot war party, and the White Renegade helping them." The Blackfoot summer camp sprawled across a verdant valley nestled between 2 rolling hills, the lodges arranged in a great circle around a central council fire. Children and dogs raced between the teepees, women worked at stretching hides or preparing food, while warriors tended to horses in a nearby meadow. Against the backdrop of distant mountains, it seemed to Sarah like a painting come to life, a world untouched by the railroads and mining companies steadily consuming the West. Chief Stonebear's war party was greeted with shouts and raised hands as they rode into camp. Curious eyes turning to the white strangers in their midst. Cole sat straight in the saddle, his face impassive, but Sarah could sense the tension in his body. Even here, among supposed allies, he remained vigilant. "Is it safe?" she murmured, still sitting behind him on Renegade. "Safer than anywhere Thornton's men can reach," Cole replied. "But tread carefully. Stonebear's protection only extends so far." They were led to a large teepee near the center of camp. Stonebear dismounted in a fluid motion, gesturing for them to do the same. Cole helped Sarah down, mindful of her wounded side, then followed the chief inside. The teepee's interior was surprisingly spacious and cool, the ground covered with woven reed mats and buffalo robes. Stonebear's wife, a dignified woman with silver-streaked hair, brought them wooden bowls of stew and a tea made from wild mint. They ate in silence, following Cole's lead in this unfamiliar protocol. After the meal, Stonebear spoke at length in his native tongue. Cole listened intently, occasionally responding in the same language. Sarah watched the exchange, fascinated by this side of Cole she hadn't seen before. A man clearly versed in Blackfoot customs and language treated with cautious respect by the chief. Finally, Cole turned to her. "Stonebear offers us shelter for 7 days," he explained. "Their medicine woman will help with your wounds. After that, we must leave their hunting grounds." "What did you tell him about us?" Sarah asked. "Enough, that you bear the mark of a bad white chief who would claim you as property, that this man sends hunters with blood money to take you back." Cole's eyes met hers. The Blackfoot understands such things better than most. Stone Bear spoke again, gesturing toward Sarah's shoulder, where the brand lay hidden beneath her clothing. He says the medicine woman can help with the mark, Cole translated. Not remove it, but change it. Make it your own, not Thornton's. Sarah felt a flicker of hope. How? Cole hesitated. It's their way of reclaiming what was taken. For warriors captured by enemies, women taken in raids. They believe a mark forced upon you holds power only if you accept its meaning. Stone Bear rose, signaling the end of the audience. As they exited the teepee, the chief clasped Cole's forearm once more, speaking earnestly. "What did he say?" Sarah asked, as they were led to a smaller teepee that would be their lodging. A shadow crossed Cole's face. "That we should rest while we can. A storm is gathering that will consume us all." The medicine woman came at dusk. Her name was Singing Bird, and despite her advanced years, she moved with the fluid grace of someone half her age. Her face was a map of wrinkles, her eyes dark pools of ancient wisdom. Two younger women accompanied her, carrying leather pouches and clay pots. Cole excused himself, leaving Sarah alone with the Blackfoot healers. Despite the language barrier, Singing Bird communicated through gestures, examining Sarah's bullet wound first, nodding approval at Cole's treatment. She applied a pungent salve that smelled of pine and sage, then rewrapped the wound with clean bandages. Next, she gestured to Sarah's shoulder. Hesitantly, Sarah removed the buckskin shirt, exposing Thornton's brand, the T, still angry and red against her pale skin. Singing Bird's face darkened as she examined the mark. She spoke to her assistants, who prepared a paste of herbs mixed with ash and what looked like crushed berries. The old woman took Sarah's hand, looking into her eyes. As she spoke words Sarah couldn't understand, but somehow felt. A question, a request for permission. Sarah nodded. What followed was both painful and strangely cathartic. Using bone needles and the prepared dyes, Singing Bird began working on the brand. Sarah gritted her teeth against the pain, understanding now this was a form of tattooing. The Blackfoot were transforming Thornton's mark into something else. Hours passed. Outside drums began to beat as the camp settled into evening rituals. Inside, the teepee lit by fat-burning lamps, the medicine woman worked with painstaking precision. Occasionally she would hum or chant, her assistants responding in kind. When it was done, one of the younger women brought a polished piece of metal, a mirror. Sarah gasped at what she saw. The crude T had been transformed into an intricate design resembling a flowering plant, rising from ashes, incorporating the original burn scar, but changing its meaning entirely. "It's beautiful," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Singing Bird touched the design gently, speaking in her flowing language. Though Sarah couldn't understand the words, the message was clear. The mark was hers now, a symbol of survival rather than ownership. Later, when Cole returned, he found Sarah wrapped in a buffalo robe, sleeping peacefully for the first time since he'd found her in the creek. In the flickering lamplight, he caught a glimpse of the transformed brand on her shoulder, and something shifted in his expression, a newfound respect, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit. Dawn broke with the sound of horses, many horses riding hard toward the camp. Cole was on his feet instantly, knife in hand, before registering it was Blackfoot scouts returning. Their urgent shouts carried across the camp, rousing warriors from their teepees. Sarah emerged from their lodge, her face tense. "What is it?" "Trouble," Cole replied, buckling on his gun belt. "Stay here." He strode toward the gathering crowd at the camp's edge, where Stone Bear was listening to his scout's report. The chief's expression was thunderous. When Cole returned, his face was grim. Cavalry patrol from Fort Laramie moving fast. 20 men armed for war. Sarah's hand went to her mouth. Birch. Cole nodded. Must have wired the fort commander claimed we're renegades stirring up the Blackfoot. His jaw tightened. Oldest trick in the book, use the army to do your dirty work. What will the Blackfoot do? Fight if the soldiers push it. These are hunting grounds guaranteed by treaty. People began gathering their few possessions. We need to leave. Our presence here puts the whole camp at risk. But where will we go? Sarah asked. If the army's looking for us too. East, Cole said decisively. Back toward your father's mine. The mine. That's the first place Thornton would look. Exactly. Cole checked his rifle. Sometimes the best hiding place is the one place they'd never expect you to go. He met her gaze directly. Besides, it's time we took the fight to Thornton. How? He has an army of hired guns, the law in his pocket. But he doesn't have this. Cole pulled something from his saddlebag, a leather-bound journal. Found it among your things when I treated your wounds. Your father's mining journal, with maps of every tunnel, including the ones Thornton doesn't know about. Sarah stared at the journal, memories flooding back. Father's backup records. I forgot I even had it. Her expression hardened. With this, we could expose Thornton's smuggling operation. More than that, Cole said. We could use those hidden tunnels to get evidence of what he's really shipping across the border. Proof that would stand up even to a bought judge. A plan was forming, dangerous but possible. Return to the mine, gather evidence, then get it to someone who couldn't be bought, the federal marshals in Cheyenne, perhaps, or the territorial governor. Stone Bear appeared at their teepee entrance, his face solemn. He spoke rapidly to Cole, who translated for Sarah. He says the spirits warned him of this. White men bringing war to the last peaceful hunting grounds. Cole paused. He's giving us horses, supplies, and 2 warriors as guides. They'll lead us through hidden trails away from the cavalry. Sarah looked at the chief, understanding the risk he was taking for strangers. Thank you, she said simply, knowing he wouldn't understand the words, but hoping he would sense the gratitude behind them. Stone Bear nodded once, then spoke again, this time looking directly at Sarah, despite addressing Cole. He says your new mark tells a story. The Great Spirit will honor death transformed into life. But the journey isn't finished. Cole's voice softened slightly. He says, the man who hunts you has a sickness in his soul that only justice can cure. Within the hour, they were riding east with their Blackfoot escorts, taking hidden game trails that wound through terrain too rough for cavalry horses. From a ridge, they caught a distant glimpse of blue uniforms, the patrol heading toward the Blackfoot camp. Cole watched them grimly, knowing Stone Bear would need all his diplomatic skill to avoid bloodshed. Their Blackfoot guides brothers named Hawkeye and Swift Elk led them through country few white men had ever seen. Ancient forests gave way to hidden valleys, secret hot springs, and narrow passes that seemed impassable until you were through them. They traveled from dawn to dusk, stopping only when necessary, always pushing eastward. On the 3rd day, they reached a towering cliff face that seemed to block further progress. Swift Elk dismounted, gesturing for them to follow. He led them to what appeared to be a solid rock wall covered with brush, but upon closer inspection revealed a narrow fissure just wide enough for a horse to pass sideways. The passage beyond opened into a breathtaking hidden canyon, a verdant oasis with a small lake fed by a waterfall at its far end. Ancient pictographs adorned the canyon walls, hunting scenes, spirit animals, and what appeared to be star maps. Sacred place, Hawkeye explained in halting English. Sleep here, safe. That night camped beside the lake under a canopy of stars, brighter than Sarah had ever seen. She found herself seated beside Cole on a fallen log, watching the firelight dance across the still water. "How did you come to know the Blackfoot language?" she asked. It had been a question she'd wanted to ask since the war party encounter. Cole was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, "After the war, after I turned in my badge, I wandered. Didn't much care if I lived or died." He poked at the fire with a stick. "Blackfoot found me half frozen in a blizzard. Could have finished me, but they didn't. Took me in instead." "Why?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Running Wolf said they were curious about the white man with the dead eyes who walked into a storm. Wanted to see if I'd find my spirit again or die trying." "And did you find your spirit?" Cole stared into the flames. "Parts of it. Enough to keep going." He glanced at her transformed brand. "How's the shoulder?" Sarah touched it gently. "Still tender, but different. Like it belongs to me now, not him." "Good." Cole nodded, satisfaction evident in his voice. "Tomorrow we cross into Thornton's territory. After that, things get complicated." Sarah studied his profile lit by the dancing flames. "Why are you risking so much for me?" "The truth, this time." Cole was quiet for a long moment. "During the war, I did things, crossed lines no man should cross. Told myself it was necessary, that the cause justified the means." His voice grew distant. "After a while, you start to believe your own lies. Start to think the rules don't apply to men like you." He tossed his stick into the fire, watching it catch and burn. "Then one day you look in the mirror and don't recognize the man staring back. That's when you know you've gone too far." "So this is redemption?" Sarah asked softly. Cole shook his head. "No, some things can't be redeemed, but they can be balanced, maybe. One life saved for each one taken." He looked at her directly. "When I saw that brand on your shoulder, I knew I couldn't walk away. Not this time." The honesty in his voice touched something deep within Sarah. Impulsively she reached out and took his hand. A simple human connection that seemed to surprise them both. They sat in companionable silence after that, each lost in their own thoughts, as the stars wheeled overhead and the waterfall's constant murmur lulled the canyon into sleep. Dawn found them already riding their Blackfoot guides, leading them through the final stretches of hidden trails. By midday, Hawkeye signaled a halt at the edge of a pine forest. Beyond lay open country, rolling hills leading toward distant mountains where Sarah knew her father's mine was located. "We go no further," Hawkeye said solemnly. "Thornton men patrol there." He handed Cole a small leather pouch. "Medicine for journey." The brothers clasped forearms with Cole in the warrior's farewell, then nodded respectfully to Sarah before turning their horses back toward their homeland. Alone now, Cole and Sarah studied the landscape before them. "Bitterroot Valley," Cole murmured. "Thornton country." "The mine is 2 days' ride from here," Sarah said, pointing toward a distinctive twin-peaked mountain on the horizon. "The main entrance is on the eastern slope." Cole nodded. "We'll avoid the main trail's approach from the north. Your father's journal mentioned secondary entrances, 3 of them disguised as abandoned prospect holes." Sarah patted the journal, now secured inside her shirt. "The northern one is least likely to be watched." They rode carefully, keeping to forested areas, where possible avoiding the occasional ranch house or line shack. As they traveled, Sarah noticed subtle changes in the landscape, more fences, surveyors' stakes, marking future railroad lines, the distant smoke of new settlements. Civilization was encroaching rapidly on what had been wilderness just years before. By nightfall, they made camp in a small hollow, risking only the smallest of fires to cook a sparse meal. Cole cleaned his weapons methodically, checking and rechecking each mechanism with the care of a man whose life had depended on such details many times before. "We should reach the north slope by tomorrow afternoon," Sarah said, studying her father's maps by firelight. "There's an entrance here." She pointed to a marked location that leads directly to the lower tunnels. Cole leaned over to study the map. "These connect to the smuggling routes." Sarah nodded. "Father mapped them all before he died. The main shaft goes down 6 levels. The 4th connects to natural caverns that extend for miles, eventually crossing under the Canadian border. Perfect for moving contraband without official eyes seeing it," Cole observed. "What's Thornton smuggling exactly? Originally opium from Canada bound for San Francisco's Chinatown." Sarah's voice hardened. "And people Chinese laborers coming south, young women going north to the brothels. When Father discovered it, he confronted Thornton privately, thinking they could reach an arrangement to stop the human trafficking." "Mistake," Cole said grimly. "Fatal one." Sarah agreed. 2 days later, there was a cave-in that killed him instantly. Her fingers traced the map lines. "But not before he documented everything. Names, dates, shipments, bribes paid to officials. And that documentation hidden," Sarah said, "in a lockbox embedded in the mine wall, 4th level western tunnel. Father showed me once, made me memorize its location in case anything happened to him." Her eyes met Cole's. "I never imagined I'd need the knowledge so soon." Cole studied her face in the firelight, seeing both the grief and determination there. "Tomorrow, then. We get in, find the evidence, get out. Then straight to the territorial governor in Helena." "If we make it that far," Sarah said softly. "We will." Cole's certainty was oddly reassuring. "Get some sleep. I'll take first watch." Sarah settled onto her bedroll watching as Cole moved to a position overlooking their small camp rifle across his knees. In the short time she'd known him, he'd become her anchor, in a world gone mad, a solid presence in a storm of uncertainty. She wondered briefly what would happen after this was over if they survived. Would Cole disappear back into the wilderness? Would she rebuild her life from the ashes Thornton had made of it? Sleep claimed her before she found answers. Her last conscious thought, the steady silhouette of Cole Blackwood against the star-strewn sky. A hand over her mouth woke her. Cole's voice urgent in her ear. "Don't move. Riders coming." The night was deep, the sliver of moon providing barely enough light to see. Cole helped her to her feet, leading her quickly to where their horses were tethered. They mounted in silence, moving deeper into the hollow as the sound of approaching riders grew louder. "Thornton's men," Sarah whispered. Cole shook his head. "Can't tell. Too many, 10, maybe 12. They maneuvered through the darkness, keeping to the deepest shadows, every sound magnified in the stillness. The riders were moving along the ridge above their hollow, following the main trail that paralleled their route. Suddenly, one of the horses above them nickered, sensing the presence of other mounts. A voice called out, "Hold up! Something down there!" Cole cursed softly, spurring Renegade forward. "Ride," he hissed to Sarah. "Head for the mine. I'll draw them off." "No," Sarah protested. "We stay together." But Cole was already wheeling his horse around, drawing his revolver. "Go. I'll find you at the northern entrance." Before she could argue further, he was gone, crashing through the underbrush toward the opposite side of the hollow. Moments later, shouts erupted from the ridge as the riders spotted him. "There he is! That's Blackwood!" Gunfire erupted, muzzle flashes, illuminating the night in strobing bursts of orange. Sarah hesitated only a moment before spurring Willow eastward toward the distant mountains and the mine that had cost her father his life. Behind her, the gunfire intensified, then began to move away as Cole led the pursuers on a chase in the opposite direction. Tears stung her eyes as she rode fear for Cole, warring with the desperate need to reach the mine and retrieve the evidence that could bring Thornton down. She rode through the night following landmarks her father had taught her. Years before, a distinctive rock formation, a bend in a creek, the silhouette of Widow's Peak against the stars. By dawn, she had covered nearly 20 miles, the twin mountains now looming closer. She rested briefly at a small stream, allowing Willow to drink while she consulted the journal. The northern entrance was marked on a hand-drawn map, a narrow shaft hidden behind a rock slide easily missed if you didn't know exactly where to look. As the sun climbed higher, Sarah approached the foothills cautiously. Mining activity had changed the landscape since her last visit. New access roads cut into the hillsides, timber harvested for shoring, the distant clang of machinery echoing through the valleys. Following her father's maps, she avoided the main mining camp circling north to approach from the blind side of the mountain. By mid-afternoon, she reached the coordinates marked in the journal, a steep, rocky slope, littered with deadfall and loose shale. Dismounting, she secured Willow in a small stand of pines, then began the treacherous climb up the scree-covered incline. Halfway up, she found what she was looking for, a dark opening partially concealed by a rock slide exactly where her father had indicated. The mine entrance was barely large enough to crawl through the ancient timbers supporting it, groaning ominously. Sarah hesitated at the threshold, the darkness beyond, seeming to reach out with grasping fingers. What if Cole never made it? What if she entered alone and became trapped in the labyrinth of tunnels beneath the mountain? But the alternative? Running, always running, with Thornton's brand forever marking her as his property, was unthinkable. Taking a deep breath, Sarah lit the small lantern she'd brought and crawled into the mine shaft, the smell of damp earth and old timber surrounding her as the daylight disappeared behind. The passage widened after 20 feet, allowing her to stand, though the ceiling remained low enough that a tall man would need to stoop. Decades-old rail tracks ran along the tunnel floor, disappearing into the darkness ahead. The air was cool and damp, heavy with mineral scents and the faint sweetness of decay. Sarah consulted the journal, orienting herself. This auxiliary shaft should connect with the main third level after about 100 yards, which would then lead to a vertical shaft down to the fourth level, where her father had hidden the evidence. She moved cautiously, testing each step, alert for signs of collapse or other dangers. The tunnel showed signs of disuse, cobwebs draped from support timbers, pools of stagnant water on the uneven floor. Clearly, Thornton's operation used other routes. After what seemed an eternity of creeping through the claustrophobic darkness, the tunnel widened into a larger chamber, a junction where multiple shafts converged. Rusty tools lay scattered about, abandoned mining carts listing on their axles. This was the third-level central hub, according to her father's maps. Sarah oriented herself, identifying the shaft that should lead downward to the fourth level. An old wooden ladder descended into darkness, its rungs worn smooth by the hands of miners long gone. She was about to begin her descent when a sound froze her in place. Voices echoing faintly from one of the connecting tunnels. Men approaching. Heart hammering, Sarah doused her lantern and pressed herself into a shadowy alcove, praying the darkness would conceal her. The voices grew louder, accompanied by the bobbing glow of lanterns. "Waste of time," one was saying. "Nothing down here but rats and bad air." "Boss says check all the levels," another replied. "After that business with the Blackfoot and the cavalry, he's taking no chances." "You really think she'd come back here? Woman's gotta be halfway to Canada by now." "Maybe, but Blackwood ain't no fool. He knows this mine is the key to bringing Thornton down." The voices were directly outside her hiding place. Now, the lantern light spilling across the chamber, pushing back the shadows inch by inch. Sarah held her breath, pressing deeper into the alcove, knowing discovery was moments away. Suddenly, from far above, came the sound of gunfire, several shots in rapid succession, followed by shouting. The men in the tunnel froze. "What the hell?" More gunfire, closer now. Then a voice bellowed down the main shaft. "Alert! We're under attack! All hands topside!" The miners exchanged glances, then hurried back the way they'd come, taking their light with them. Sarah remained frozen in her hiding place, scarcely believing her luck. Someone was attacking the mine, creating a diversion. Could it be Cole? She relit her lantern and hurried to the ladder, descending as quickly as safety allowed. The fourth level was different, the rough-hewn walls giving way to natural limestone formations where the miners had broken through into pre-existing caverns. Water dripped from stalactites, forming small mineral-rich pools on the cave floor. Following her father's directions, Sarah made her way west, deeper into the mountain. The natural cavern narrowed, then opened into a larger chamber where the ceiling soared beyond the reach of her lantern light. Here the miners had built a wooden platform spanning a seemingly bottomless chasm, the entrance to the smuggling tunnels. Sarah crossed carefully, the ancient boards creaking beneath her weight. On the far side, she counted support beams until she reached the seventh, distinguished by a rust-colored stain shaped vaguely like a wolf's head. Behind this beam, wedged into a narrow fissure in the rock wall, she found what she was seeking, a metal lockbox, its surface green with verdigris. With trembling fingers she prized it free, surprised by its weight. Inside would be everything needed to destroy Thornton shipping manifests, bribe records, perhaps even evidence of her father's murder. The box was locked, but the key hung on a leather thong around her neck, given to her by her father on her last birthday with instructions to guard it always. The key turned with difficulty, the mechanism stiff with disuse. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a leather-bound ledger and a stack of documents, official-looking papers, bearing government seals, letters signed by names she recognized as territorial officials, and most damning of all, detailed records of human cargo shipped through the tunnels. Sarah's hands shook as she leafed through the evidence. Names, dates, amounts paid her father had documented everything meticulously. Here was proof not only of smuggling, but of corruption reaching to the highest levels of territorial government. So absorbed was she in the discovery that she failed to notice the approaching footsteps until it was too late. "I must say, Miss Hargrove, you've led us on quite a chase." Sarah whirled the ledger clutched to her chest. Standing at the edge of the platform, flanked by two armed men, was Judge Howard Howell, the most powerful judicial authority in the territory, and according to the documents in her hands, Thornton's primary accomplice. "All this trouble," Howell continued, his aristocratic voice echoing in the cavern, "when a simple yes to Mr. Thornton's proposal would have made you a wealthy woman." Sarah backed away, but there was nowhere to go. Behind her lay only the chasm. "Where's Thornton?" she demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. "Dealing with your friend Blackwood," Howell replied, a cruel smile touching his thin lips. "Rather permanently, I should think." Cold fear gripped Sarah's heart. "You're lying." "Am I?" Howell gestured to his men. "Take her, and the documents." As the men advanced across the platform, a new sound echoed through the cavern, the metallic click of a revolver being cocked. "That's far enough, Judge." The voice came from the darkness beyond the platform, a voice Sarah recognized instantly. Cole Blackwood stepped into the lantern light, his revolver aimed steadily at Howell's heart. His clothes were torn and bloodied, his face streaked with dirt, and what looked like powder burns. but his eyes were clear and cold as winter ice. "Blackwood," Howell said, his composure slipping momentarily. "Thornton said you were dead." "Wouldn't be the first time someone's made that mistake," Cole replied, his gun never wavering. "Tell your men to drop their weapons." Howell's face hardened. "You're outnumbered, Blackwood. Even if you shoot me, they'll kill you both." "Maybe," Cole agreed. "Cole, but you'll still be dead." He took another step forward. "And I never miss." A tense silence filled the cavern, broken only by the distant drip of water and the faint echo of commotion far above. Sarah could see the calculation in Howell's eyes, weighing the certainty of Cole's aim against the skills of his hired guns. Apparently deciding discretion was the better part of valor. Howell nodded to his men. "Put them down." The men reluctantly lowered their weapons. "Kick them over the edge," Cole ordered. When they hesitated, he added, "Now." The guns skittered across the wooden platform and disappeared into the chasm below. "Sarah," Cole said, without taking his eyes off Howell, "come to me." Slowly. She began edging around the men, the precious documents clutched to her chest. She was halfway to Cole when Howell made his move, lunging not for her, but for a lever mounted on the nearest support beam. "Cole!" Sarah screamed in warning. Cole fired the shot, deafening in the enclosed space. Howell staggered, but completed his motion, yanking the lever downward with his dying strength. A mechanical groan filled the cavern as hidden machinery engaged. The platform beneath their feet shuddered violently, then began to separate sections of it, dropping away into the darkness below as support cables snapped. "Run!" Cole shouted, holstering his weapon to reach for her. Sarah leapt forward as the platform disintegrated behind her, the ledger flying from her grasp as she stumbled. Cole caught her arm, dragging her toward solid ground, as Howell's men screamed, plummeting into the abyss. They landed hard on the stone floor of the cavern as the last of the platform collapsed, the echoes of falling debris continuing long after the structure had disappeared. "Are you hurt?" Cole demanded, helping Sarah to her feet. "The documents," she gasped, staring in horror at the chasm. "They fell everything we needed." "Not everything," Cole said grimly, reaching into his coat to withdraw a folded paper. "Found this in Thornton's office while creating my diversion. It's a contract with the territorial governor. Thornton gets exclusive mining rights in exchange for 20% of the smuggling profits." Sarah stared at the document, then at Cole. "You went to Thornton's office alone." A ghost of a smile touched Cole's bloodied lips. "Wasn't invited." Before Sarah could respond, a new sound reached them, boots on stone, many men approaching rapidly. "Thornton's reinforcements," Cole said, checking his ammunition. "We need to move, now." "Is there another way out?" Sarah asked, looking around desperately. Cole nodded toward the darkness beyond the chasm. "Your father's journal mentioned a southern exit through the smuggling tunnels. It's our only chance." They hurried deeper into the caverns, Cole's lantern casting grotesque shadows on the limestone walls. Behind them, shouts echoed as Thornton's men discovered Howell's body and the destroyed platform. The natural tunnel system was a maze of twisting passages, some so narrow they had to squeeze through sideways, others opening into cathedral-like chambers filled with fantastic mineral formations. They moved as quickly as they dared, Cole consulting the journal frequently to navigate. "Should be a vertical shaft ahead," he muttered, studying a crude map. "Leads to the surface near Wheeler Creek." But as they rounded a bend, they found their path blocked by a recent cave-in, tons of rock and debris sealing the tunnel completely. "No," Sarah whispered, the hopelessness of their situation sinking in. "We're trapped." Cole examined the blockage, then the surrounding walls, his expression grim. Maybe not. He pointed to a narrow fissure high on the cavern wall. Air's moving through there. Might be another way out. The sounds of pursuit grew louder. Thornton's men were getting closer, and they knew these tunnels better than Cole and Sarah did. Cole boosted Sarah up to the fissure, which was barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. She pulled herself into the opening, finding it opened into another tunnel beyond, smaller, rougher, but definitely a potential escape route. "It goes through," she called down to Cole, "but it's tight. I don't know if you'll fit." Only one way to find out. Cole slung his rifle across his back and began climbing up to the fissure using natural handholds in the limestone. He was halfway up when the first of Thornton's men appeared at the tunnel entrance, behind them raising a rifle. "There they are!" the man shouted, taking aim at Cole's exposed back. Sarah reacted without thinking, drawing her revolver and firing. The shot went wide, but it was enough to make the gunman duck for cover, buying Cole precious seconds to reach the fissure. More men poured into the cavern, bullets ricocheting off the stone around them as Cole struggled to squeeze his broader frame through the narrow opening. Sarah grabbed his coat, pulling with all her strength, as he pushed himself forward inch by agonizing inch. A bullet struck stone inches from Cole's head, showering him with fragments. Another tore through the sleeve of his coat. With a final desperate effort, he forced himself through the fissure, tumbling onto the floor of the smaller tunnel beyond. Sarah helped him to his feet, and they staggered forward into the unknown passage, the sounds of frustrated pursuit fading behind them. The tunnel sloped upward, growing narrower in places, widening in others, always trending toward the surface. After what seemed like hours of desperate scrambling, they detected a change in the air, fresher, carrying the scent of pine and open spaces. Ahead, a faint glow that wasn't from their lantern beckoned. They emerged from a small opening half hidden by brush on the southern slope of the mountain, the late afternoon sun momentarily blinding after so long underground. Below them stretched Wheeler Creek Valley, and beyond that, the open country leading toward the territorial capital. "We made it," Sarah breathed, scarcely believing their luck. Cole nodded, scanning the terrain with a tactician's eye. "For now, but Thornton won't give up. Not while we have this." He patted the incriminating contract secured inside his coat. Sarah looked back at the mine entrance, then at Cole. "What now?" "Now we get this evidence to someone who can't be bought." Cole's face was set in determined lines. "The territorial governor might be corrupt, but the federal marshal in Helena answers directly to Washington." "It's at least 3 days' ride," Sarah said doubtfully. "Without horses' supplies." "Then we'd better start walking," Cole replied, setting off down the slope with the grim determination that had kept him alive through war and its violent aftermath. Sarah followed, matching his stride despite her exhaustion. The brand on her shoulder, now transformed into a symbol of her own choosing, seemed to burn with renewed purpose. Thornton had taken everything from her, her father, her home, her dignity, but he hadn't broken her spirit. And now, finally, she had the means to destroy him. What neither of them saw was the lone rider watching from a distant ridge, Wallace Birch the hangman, observing their emergence through a brass spyglass. His weathered face revealed nothing as he lowered the glass and turned his horse toward Thornton's main camp. The game had entered its final phase, and Birch intended to be there when the last cards were played. Wheeler Creek Valley stretched before them like a golden sea, tall grass rippling in the late afternoon breeze. Under different circumstances, the scene might have been peaceful, even beautiful. But to Cole Blackwood, every swaying blade of grass represented potential concealment for Thornton's men, every distant tree line a possible ambush. "We need to get off this mountain before nightfall," he said, eyes constantly scanning the terrain. "Too exposed here." Sarah nodded, her face drawn with exhaustion, but eyes still alert. The ordeal in the mine had drained her, yet she moved with determined strides as they descended the rocky slope toward the valley floor. Cole's mind worked through their options with the methodical precision of a man accustomed to surviving against the odds. They were 30 miles from the nearest town on foot, with limited ammunition and no supplies. Thornton would have men watching all major trails, and the cavalry might still be searching for them after Birch's false report. "There's a line shack about 5 miles south," Sarah said, as if reading his thoughts. "One of my father's old prospecting cabins. Might be supplies there, maybe horses." Cole glanced at her with newfound respect. Despite everything, Sarah Hargrove was proving to be as resilient as any frontier scout he'd ridden with. "Lead the way," he replied. They kept to the tree line, where possible avoiding open ground. The sun was low on the horizon when they reached a small creek, a tributary of Wheeler that meandered through a stand of cottonwoods. They paused to drink coal-washing blood and mine dust from his face, while Sarah refilled their single canteen. "How badly are you hurt?" she asked, eyeing the bloodstains on his shirt. Cole shrugged. "Caught some splinters when the platform collapsed. Nothing serious." It was a lie. He had a bullet graze along his ribs that burned like fire with every movement, but there was no point worrying her with things that couldn't be helped. "And Thornton?" Sarah asked, her voice carefully neutral. "You said he thought you were dead." A grim smile touched Cole's lips. "Let's just say he's rethinking that assessment." The diversion he'd created had been more direct than he'd admitted a frontal assault on Thornton's office at the main mining camp, where he'd discovered the incriminating contract. The ensuing gunfight had left 3 of Thornton's men dead, and the office in flames. They continued south as darkness fell, guided by starlight and Sarah's memory of the terrain. The line shack appeared as a dark silhouette against the night sky, a small, crude structure nestled in a hollow between 2 hills. Cole approached cautiously, revolver drawn. The cabin had clearly been abandoned for some time. The door hung askew on broken hinges, and a family of raccoons had taken up residence in one corner. But it offered shelter, and better yet, beneath a rotting floorboard, Sarah found her father's emergency cache, jerky coffee ammunition, and a small medical kit. "Your father planned ahead," Cole observed, examining the supplies. "He never trusted easily," Sarah replied, a shadow crossing her face. "Said a man in the mining business needed an escape route and supplies stashed where only he could find them." She looked around the dilapidated cabin. Fat lot of good it did him in the end. Cole said nothing, understanding the bitterness in her voice. Instead, he set about securing the cabin, repairing the door as best he could, covering the single window with a rotting blanket, and gathering what little dry wood he could find for a small, smokeless fire. Sarah used water from a nearby spring to prepare coffee and reconstitute some of the jerky into a rough stew. They ate in silence, both too exhausted for conversation. Afterward, Cole insisted on treating the wound on Sarah's side, which had reopened slightly during their escape from the mine. "It's healing well," he said, applying salve from the medical kit. "No infection." He rewrapped the bandage with practiced efficiency. "Your turn," Sarah said when he'd finished. Cole hesitated, then nodded, pulling his shirt aside to reveal the bullet graze along his ribs, an angry red furrow 6 inches long, crusted with dried blood. Sarah inhaled sharply. "You said it was nothing serious." "Compared to what it could have been," Cole replied, wincing as she began cleaning the wound. "Half an inch to the right, we wouldn't be having this conversation." They fell silent as Sarah worked her fingers, gentle but firm, as she cleaned, salved, and bandaged the injury. Cole found himself acutely aware of her closeness, the faint scent of her hair beneath the stronger smells of earth and gunpowder that clung to them both. "Thank you," he said quietly when she'd finished. For all of this. Sarah met his gaze, something unspoken passing between them. I should be thanking you. You've risked everything for me, a stranger. Not a stranger anymore, Cole replied, his voice low. He reached out, hesitated, then gently touched the transformed brand on her shoulder, no longer Thornton's mark of ownership, but a symbol of her resilience. Some things bind people together faster than years of acquaintance. Sarah's breath caught at his touch, and for a moment, the cabin seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them suspended in a moment out of time. Then Cole withdrew his hand, the spell broken. You should rest, he said, moving toward the door. I'll take first watch. Sarah nodded, settling onto a makeshift pallet near the fire. Cole positioned himself by the door rifle across his knees, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond. Behind him, Sarah's breathing gradually slowed into the rhythm of sleep, but Cole remained vigilant-minded, turning over the challenges that lay ahead. The contract he'd stolen proved Thornton's corruption extended to the highest levels of territorial government. But it was one document against the word of powerful men. They needed more, the complete evidence that had been lost in the mine collapse, and they needed to survive long enough to deliver it. Dawn brought a thin drizzle that shrouded the landscape in mist, providing welcome concealment as they set out. The respite at the line shack had restored some of their energy, but both knew they were racing against time. Thornton would be marshalling his forces, and Birch, if he was still tracking them, was not a man who gave up easily. We need horses, Cole said as they crested a ridge overlooking the valley. On foot, it's 4 days to Helena. Mounted, we could make it in 2. Wheeler Creek Settlement is closest, Sarah replied, pointing to the southeast. Small trading post, maybe a dozen permanent residents. Father used to buy supplies there. Thornton's influence, limited. It's too small to matter much, and the locals are mostly independent miners and trappers. She hesitated. But word travels. If Thornton's put out a general alert... Cole nodded grimly. We'll have to risk it. We can't outrun them on foot. They traveled through the morning, keeping to ravines and wooded areas where possible. By noon, the drizzle had intensified into a steady rain that soaked through their clothing, but mercifully reduced visibility to a few hundred yards, an advantage for the hunted. Wheeler Creek Settlement appeared through the rain as a cluster of rough-hewn buildings huddled around a central trading post. A few horses stood hitched outside, heads lowered against the downpour. Smoke rose from several chimneys promising warmth and humanity after days of wilderness and danger. Cole and Sarah watched from the shelter of a pine thicket on a nearby hill, assessing the situation. No unusual activity, no sign of Thornton's men or cavalry patrols, just a typical frontier settlement enduring a summer storm. I'll go in alone, Cole decided. Less conspicuous. You stay hidden. And if you don't come back, Sarah asked, the worry evident in her voice. Cole handed her his revolver, keeping the rifle for himself. If I'm not back in an hour, head northeast. There's a Crow settlement 2 days' journey. Ask for Black Kettle, he might help you for running Wolf's sake. Sarah took the gun, her fingers brushing his. Be careful. Cole nodded, then descended toward the settlement, adopting the slightly bow-legged gait of a man who'd spent too many days in the saddle. He pulled his hat low, using the rain as an excuse to keep his face shadowed. The trading post was warm and smoky. Inside, 6 men gathered around a pot-bellied stove, mugs of coffee or stronger spirits in hand. Conversation died briefly as Cole entered, men sizing him up with the cautious appraisal common to frontier settlements, then resumed as he was deemed unremarkable. Cole approached the counter, where a barrel-chested man with an impressive mustache was tallying accounts in a ledger. Need supplies, Cole said, keeping his voice low. And a horse, if you've got one to sell. The proprietor looked up shrewd eyes, taking in Cole's trail-worn appearance. Supplies I got. Horses are scarce since the army requisitioned most of them last month. He closed his ledger. Where are you headed, stranger? Helena, Cole replied, seeing no reason to lie about their destination. Got business with the federal marshal there. Interest flickered in the man's eyes. Marshal business, eh? Seems there's been a lot of that lately. Had a special deputy through here yesterday asking after fugitives. Man named Birch. Cole kept his expression neutral, though his pulse quickened. That's so. What sort of fugitives? Man and woman, the proprietor replied, watching Cole's reaction. Said they were wanted for murder theft of mining property. Left these. He reached under the counter and produced a wanted poster, the same one Cole had seen at Riverbend, with his face crudely rendered beneath the word murderer. Beside it was a second poster showing a woman's face, Sarah's, though the likeness was poor. The text described her as mentally unbalanced and dangerous. Seen 'em? The proprietor asked casually. Cole studied the posters as if with mild curiosity. Can't say that I have. What's the bounty? 500 for him, 2,500 for her. Quite the price. Cole nodded thoughtfully. Quite the price indeed. Makes a man wonder what she knows that's worth so much. The proprietor's mustache twitched. Thought the same myself. He leaned forward slightly. Deputy Birch seemed mighty interested in that line shack south of Wheeler Creek. Sent 2 men to check it, not 3 hours ago. Cole's blood ran cold. If Birch's men had found sign of their presence at the line shack, they could be tracking them even now. About that horse, he said, struggling to keep his voice even. I can pay well. The proprietor studied him for a long moment, then made a decision. Got an old mare out back. Not much to look at, but she's sound. He named a price fair considering the circumstances. Cole counted out gold dust from his dwindling supply. As the proprietor measured it, he asked casually, Any other strangers in town today? Just you, the man replied, then hesitated. Though Bill Harker rode in from Thornton's main camp this morning, said there was some excitement up there yesterday, fire at the office men killed. Thornton's offering extra wages for anyone willing to join a search party. What are they searching for? The proprietor's gaze was piercing now. Didn't say, but he's drinking over at the Silvertip, if you're curious. Cole understood the implied warning. He gathered the supplies he'd purchased, ammunition, food, medical supplies, and followed the proprietor through the back door to where a brown mare stood in a small corral, looking as wet and miserable as Cole felt. She'll get you to Helena, the proprietor said, handing over the reins. Then more quietly, whatever you're mixed up in, mister, it's stirring up the whole territory. Thornton's called in every marker he's got, hired guns coming in from as far as Wyoming and Dakota. Why tell me this? Cole asked. The proprietor's face hardened. Because 10 years ago, Thornton's operation flooded my brother's mine, killed him and 12 others. Called it an accident, but we all knew better. He spat into the mud. Any enemy of Thornton's is welcome in Wheeler Creek. Cole mounted the mare, adjusting himself to her gait. Much obliged. One more thing. Any idea how many men Birch has with him? 4 that I've seen. Mean-looking bunch. They're camped north of town watching the Helena Road. The proprietor paused. There's an old trapper's trail that branches east from Cottonwood Creek. Wouldn't want to take a wagon that way, but a couple of riders could make good time. Cole nodded his thanks, then rode out through a back alley, keeping buildings between himself and the main street. The rain continued to fall, obscuring his passage as he circled around to where Sarah waited in the pine thicket. She emerged at his approach, relief evident on her face. "You're back." "And with transportation," Cole replied, helping her mount behind him. "But we need to move fast. Birch's men checked the line shack. They know we're in the area." They rode east, pushing the mare as hard as they dared on the rain-slicked terrain. Cole shared what he'd learned in Wheeler Creek Birch's presence. Thornton's escalating manhunt, the trapper's trail that might offer a safer route to Helena. How did Birch know about the line shack? Sarah wondered aloud. No one knew about those emergency caches except my father and me. Cole's expression darkened. Someone else knew, or he wouldn't have found it. Question is, how much more does he know? They reached Cottonwood Creek by mid-afternoon, the rain finally slackening to a fine mist. The creek was swollen with runoff, its usual placid surface transformed into a churning, muddy torrent. "Trapper's Trail should be just upstream," Cole said, scanning the opposite bank. They followed the creek north for half a mile, before finding the trail barely discernible as anything more than a game path, winding into the dense forest beyond. Cole turned the mare onto it, the animal picking her way carefully over the rain-softened ground. The trail climbed steadily, switchbacking up a forested ridge that offered occasional glimpses of the valley behind them. During one such moment, Cole reined in sharply, pointing to a distant spot on the valley floor. "Riders," he said grimly. 6, maybe 7. Moving fast." Sarah strained to see through the mist. "Birch. Can't tell from here, but they're following our trail, that's certain." Cole urged the mare forward with new urgency. "We need to find a place to make a stand or lose them somehow." The trail grew steeper, narrowing in places to a treacherous ribbon of mud clinging to the mountainside. The mare struggled under their combined weight, forcing them to dismount and lead her through the most difficult stretches. By sunset, they had reached the ridge crest where the trees thinned enough to provide a panoramic view of the territory they'd crossed. The valley lay spread beneath them like a map, Wheeler Creek settlement, a cluster of toy-sized buildings in the distance. And on the trail below, clearly visible now, rode their pursuers, 6 men strung out in single file, methodically following their track despite the gathering darkness. "They're not giving up," Sarah said, a note of despair creeping into her voice. "Even at night." Cole studied the pursuing riders through his spyglass, his expression hardening as he recognized the lead figure, Wallace Birch, the hangman himself, relentless as death. "There's a reason Birch has the reputation he does," Cole said, collapsing the spyglass. "He doesn't stop. Not for weather, not for darkness, not for anything but his quarry." They continued along the ridge, the trail now following its spine eastward toward distant Helena. The terrain worked in their favor, rocky ground, leaving less obvious tracks, but the mare was tiring rapidly, her sides heaving with exertion. Night fell fully, bringing with it a bone-deep chill as the rain clouds cleared, revealing a sky ablaze with stars. They dared not stop pushing on by starlight, each step taking them closer to Helena and the justice they sought, but also burning precious energy their pursuers would not waste. Shortly after midnight, disaster struck. The mare, exhausted beyond endurance, stumbled on a patch of loose shale, her foreleg buckling beneath her. Cole and Sarah barely managed to jump clear as the animal went down, a terrible scream of equine pain piercing the night. Cole was at her side instantly, hands running over the injured leg. His expression told Sarah everything she needed to know. "Broken?" she asked quietly. Cole nodded grimly, drawing his revolver. "I'm sorry, old girl," he murmured to the suffering animal. "You deserved better." Sarah turned away as the shot echoed across the ridge. When she looked back, Cole was retrieving their meager supplies from the saddlebags his face set in hard lines. "We continue on foot," he said, handing her a share of the burden. "There's a hunting cabin marked on the map about 5 miles ahead. We might make it by dawn." They set off into the darkness, the weight of failure pressing down on them with each step. Without the mare, their chances of reaching Helena before Birch caught up had dwindled from slim to nearly non-existent. The night stretched endlessly, each mile harder than the last. Cole set a punishing pace, driven by the knowledge that Birch would find the dead horse and redouble his efforts, knowing his prey was now on foot. Dawn found them stumbling with exhaustion, having covered perhaps 4 of the 5 miles to the hunting cabin. The ridge had given way to a high plateau, dotted with stunted pines and rocky outcroppings. Perfect ambush country, Cole thought grimly, every sense alert despite his fatigue. "There," Sarah said, suddenly pointing to a stand of pines ahead. "I think I see it." The hunting cabin was little more than a crude shelter, 3 walls of stacked logs with a sloped roof and an open front facing a fire pit. But it offered concealment and a defensible position, both of which they desperately needed. Cole helped Sarah into the shelter, then gathered what dry wood he could find. A fire was a risk, but without warmth. Exhaustion and exposure would claim them before Birch ever could. As flames crackled to life, Sarah sagged against the back wall, the last of her strength finally giving out. Cole handed her jerky and water, which she accepted mechanically, too tired even to taste what she consumed. "Rest," he said gently. "I'll keep watch." Sarah nodded, her eyes already closing. Within moments, she was asleep, her breathing deep and even. Cole positioned himself at the edge of the shelter, rifle ready, watching the trail they'd traveled. The morning sun cast long shadows across the plateau, creating pockets of darkness where danger might lurk. But for now, there was no sign of pursuit. As Sarah slept, Cole studied the contract he'd taken from Thornton's office, the document that proved the territorial governor's complicity in the smuggling operation. It was damning, but without the full evidence from Sarah's father's lockbox, now lost in the mine collapse, it might not be enough to bring down men as powerful as Thornton and the governor. Hours passed. Cole allowed himself brief moments of rest, never fully sleeping, always alert for the sounds of approach. By mid-afternoon, Sarah stirred, looking better for the rest, despite the grime and exhaustion still evident on her face. "Any sign of them?" she asked, accepting the water Cole offered. "Not yet, but they're coming." Cole had no doubt of that. Birch was a human bloodhound, and with the trail now on foot, easier to follow. Sarah studied his face, reading the grim calculation there. "We're not going to outrun them, are we?" "Not likely," Cole admitted. "But we're only a day's hard march from Helena. If we can hold them off long enough—" He didn't finish the thought. They both knew what slim hope remained. Reach the federal marshal in Helena with the contract hope. It was enough to launch an investigation that would eventually uncover the full extent of Thornton's crimes. A slim hope indeed. They ate a sparse meal, conserving their dwindling supplies, then continued eastward. The plateau gradually gave way to rolling foothills that would eventually lead down to the Helena Valley. The going was easier now, but they were painfully exposed on the open terrain visible for miles to anyone following. Late afternoon brought the first confirmation that Birch was still on their trail. From a high vantage point, Cole spotted distant figures on horseback, perhaps 3 miles back, but moving steadily in their direction. "They'll overtake us before nightfall at that pace," he said, lowering his spyglass. Sarah's face was set in determined lines. "Then we make a stand. Choose the ground, make them come to us." Cole nodded, a hint of pride in his eyes at her unflagging courage. "There's a narrow pass ahead, Elk Throat, the Blackfoot call it. One man with a rifle could hold it against a dozen. They pushed on with renewed urgency, reaching Elk Throat as the sun dipped toward the western horizon. The pass was exactly as Cole had described, a natural bottleneck between two sheer rock faces barely wide enough for two men to walk abreast. A perfect defensive position. Cole positioned Sarah behind a rock outcropping at the eastern end of the pass, giving her his revolver and half their remaining ammunition. He would hold the western entrance with the rifle where his marksmanship could be put to best use. "If I fall," he told her, his voice matter-of-fact. "Don't wait. Make for Helena with the contract. Ask for Marshal James Harker. He's straight, can't be bought." Sarah gripped his arm. "We go together, or not at all?" Cole shook his head. "This isn't about us anymore. It's about justice for your father, for all the others Thornton has killed or ruined." His eyes held hers. "Promise me, Sarah." After a long moment, she nodded. "I promise." Cole squeezed her hand, then moved to his position at the western entrance, settling behind a boulder that offered both cover and a clear field of fire down the approach. The rifle was loaded, extra cartridges arranged neatly within easy reach. All that remained was to wait. The sun touched the horizon, painting the landscape in bloody hues of orange and crimson. In that dying light, Cole spotted them 6 riders approaching at a steady trot, Birch in the lead. They halted just beyond rifle range, dismounting to confer. Through his spyglass, Cole could see Birch gesturing toward the pass, clearly recognizing the tactical situation. The other men spread out, taking positions among the rocks and scrub at the base of the pass. They were settling in for a siege. Darkness fell swiftly in the mountains, stars appearing in a velvet sky, unmarred by city lights. Cole remained vigilant, watching for any movement in the gloom below. Twice he detected attempts to approach under cover of darkness, and twice his warning shots drove the would-be attackers back. Around midnight, a voice called up from the darkness. Birch pitched to carry, but not to reveal his position. "Blackwood, I know you can hear me." Cole remained silent, rifle trained on the sound. "This doesn't have to end badly," Birch continued. "Thornton just wants the woman and the documents. You walk away free and clear." When Cole still didn't respond, Birch tried another approach. "You're outnumbered, outgunned, and out of options. You think you can hold this pass forever? We have food, water, ammunition. What do you have?" The question hung in the night air, uncomfortably accurate. Their supplies would last another day at most. After that, thirst would become their enemy, as surely as Birch's men. "Think about it, Ghost." Birch called a note of something almost like regret in his voice. "You were the best once. Don't die in a nameless pass for a woman you barely know." Cole glanced back toward Sarah's position, though he couldn't see her in the darkness. He thought of their journey together, the transformation he'd witnessed, from terrified fugitive to determined fighter, reclaiming her life mark by mark, step by step. Barely know her. Perhaps in time measured, but not in trials faced. He'd seen more of Sarah Hargrove's true character in their short acquaintance than he had of most men he'd ridden with for years. No, this stand wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about something Cole had thought long dead within himself, the capacity to care about another human being more than his own survival. A sound pulled him from his thoughts, a faint scraping from the rocks to his left. Someone trying to flank his position under cover of Birch's distraction. Cole shifted silently, bringing his rifle to bear on the source of the noise. A shadow moved against the starlit sky, one of Birch's men, climbing the rock face, thinking himself unseen. Cole sighted carefully, then squeezed the trigger. The rifle's report shattered the night, followed by a cry and the sound of a body tumbling down the rocky slope. Instantly, gunfire erupted from below, bullets ricocheting off the rocks around Cole's position. He pressed himself flat, returning fire only when he had a clear target. From Sarah's position came answering shots, precise, measured, making every bullet count just as he'd taught her. The firefight continued for perhaps 10 minutes before falling silent again, both sides conserving ammunition in the darkness. Cole reloaded, counting his remaining cartridges. 12 for the rifle, perhaps 20 for the revolver Sarah held. Not enough for a prolonged siege. As if reading his thoughts, Birch's voice came again from the darkness. "That was just a taste. Blackwood come dawn. We'll rush the pass from both sides. You can't watch every approach." Cole knew it wasn't an idle threat. Birch had the men and ammunition to make good on his promise. By this time tomorrow, they would likely be dead or captured, unless a miracle intervened. Sarah's voice came quietly from behind him. "He's right, isn't he? They'll overwhelm us at dawn." Cole didn't turn. Probably. She moved closer, settling beside him behind the boulder. "Then we should make a run for it now, under cover of darkness. Helena can't be more than 15 miles. "Birch will have men watching the eastern exit," Cole replied. "We'd be cut down before we cleared the pass." Sarah was silent for a moment, absorbing this reality. Then, with a determination that surprised even Cole, "There must be another way. A path we haven't considered." Cole was about to respond when a new sound reached them, distant at first, then growing louder. Hoofbeats, many horses approaching rapidly from the east. "Reinforcements," he muttered grimly. Thornton must have sent more men. But as the riders drew closer, Cole realized something was wrong. They were approaching from the wrong direction from the east, the direction of Helena, not from Wheeler Creek, where Thornton's men would come from. Sarah heard it too. "That's not Thornton's men," she whispered. "Who?" Her question was answered by a sound that froze Cole's blood, the distinctive war cry of Blackfoot warriors, followed by the crack of rifles and the screams of men under attack. Chaos erupted at the eastern base of the pass as the newcomers fell upon Birch's men stationed there. In the starlight, Cole caught glimpses of mounted warriors, their faces painted for war, cutting down the surprised bounty hunters with ruthless efficiency. "Running wolf." Cole breathed, scarcely believing it. He brought a war party. The attack was swift and merciless. Within minutes, the sounds of battle faded, replaced by the victorious whoops of Blackfoot warriors. Then a voice called up the pass. Running Wolf, speaking in his native tongue. "Ghost who walks. The path is clear. Come quickly before more white eyes arrive." Cole called back in the same language, then turned to Sarah. "It's our chance. Running Wolf has cleared the eastern exit. If we can reach his warriors." A shot rang out from below, cutting him off. Birch, recognizing the trap closing around him, was making his move. Cole pushed Sarah down as bullets whined overhead. "Go," he shouted. "Run for the eastern exit. I'll hold them here." Sarah hesitated, unwilling to leave him. "Cole." "Go," he repeated more forcefully. "Get that contract to Helena. It's what we came for." With obvious reluctance, Sarah gathered their few remaining supplies and the precious contract. She paused for one moment, looking back at Cole as if to memorize his features, then disappeared into the darkness toward the eastern exit of the pass. Cole turned his full attention to the western approach, where Birch and his remaining men were attempting to rush the pass under covering fire. He sighted carefully, dropping the lead man with a clean shot to the chest. The others faltered, diving for cover. "It's over, Birch," Cole called. "Your men at the eastern exit are dead. Blackfoot warriors control the pass now. A bitter laugh came from the darkness. Then I've got nothing to lose. Have I, Ghost? More gunfire erupted, bullets peppering Cole's position with increasing accuracy as Birch's men found his range. A round grazed his arm, another splintered the rock inches from his head. He was pinned down, unable to move without exposing himself to a killing shot. In that moment, Cole made a decision. Sarah was safely away, the contract with her. Running Wolf's warriors would ensure she reached Helena. His part in this was done. But Wallace Birch, the hangman, would not escape justice. Not this time. Cole waited for a lull in the firing, then rose suddenly, exposing himself to full view. "Birch," he roared, "it's me you want. Come and get me." He fired his remaining rifle rounds in quick succession, forcing Birch's men back, then dropped the empty weapon and drew his knife, the only weapon he had left. From below came a chilling laugh. "Finally showing your true colors, Ghost." Birch's voice carried clearly in the night air. "Just like old times." Cole said nothing, watching as a figure detached itself from the shadows below and began climbing toward his position, Birch, coming to finish the job personally. Behind him, Cole could hear the approach of running Wolf's warriors from the eastern end of the pass, but they would arrive too late. This would end, as it had begun, between two men who had once ridden the same dark path. As Birch's silhouette appeared against the starlit sky, knife in one hand and revolver in the other, Cole prepared himself for what might be his final battle. Whatever happened next, Sarah would reach Helena with the evidence. Thornton would fall, justice would be served, and perhaps, in this last act, Cole Blackwood might finally lay his ghosts to rest. Birch climbed with the fluid grace of a mountain lion, revolver holstered to free his hand for the ascent. The starlight caught the blade of his knife, a wicked bowie that had ended many lives across the frontier. Cole watched his approach with the calm detachment of a man who had made peace with his mortality long ago. "Like old times, Ghost?" Birch called his voice, carrying in the night air. "You and me settling things proper." Cole said nothing, conserving his energy, evaluating the terrain between them. Behind him, the sounds of running Wolf's warriors grew closer, but the narrow pass would force them to approach single file. Too slow to intervene before this confrontation reached its conclusion. Birch reached a small ledge 20 feet below Cole's position, pausing to catch his breath. "Remember Abilene, the Sutton brothers. 6 men, and you took them all with just that knife." There was something like grudging admiration in his voice. "Never seen anything like it before or since." "That was another life," Cole replied, shifting his weight, ready to move in any direction. Birch laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "No, Ghost. That's who you really are. All this time hiding in the mountains playing hermit. It's just you running from yourself." He resumed climbing. "Me, I never pretended to be anything but what I am." 10 feet separated them now. Cole could see Birch's face, clearly weathered leather stretched over hard-bone eyes that reflected starlight, but gave nothing back. The face of a man who had long ago surrendered whatever humanity he once possessed. "Why work for Thornton?" Cole asked, playing for time, assessing Birch's condition. The bounty hunter moved well, but favored his left side slightly. An old injury, perhaps. "You were a marshal once, sworn to uphold the law." "Law?" Birch spat the word. "What law?" "The law that lets men like Thornton buy judges, that hangs innocent homesteaders while railroad barons steal their land." He was just below Cole now, knife held ready. "At least Thornton's honest about his corruption, pays well, too." 2,500 for Sarah, Cole said. "Must be quite the threat to him." Not her. What she knows. Birch tensed, preparing to lunge upward for the final ascent. Nothing personal, Ghost. Just business. Cole saw the attack coming a feint, left, then a sudden upward thrust that would have disemboweled a less experienced opponent. But Cole was no ordinary adversary. He stepped into the attack rather than away, catching Birch's wrist with his left hand, while driving his own knife toward the bounty hunter's throat. Birch twisted with serpentine speed, avoiding the killing blow. The two men grappled at the edge of the precipice, each seeking leverage knives flashing in the starlight. Years of shared history hung between them. Former comrades turned deadly enemies, each knowing the other's methods as intimately as his own. "She'll never make it to Helena," Birch hissed as they struggled. "Thornton's men are everywhere. The governor, the judges, all bought and paid for. Not the federal marshal," Cole grunted, blocking a thrust that would have opened his femoral artery. "Not Washington. You think they care about one mining town, one corrupt territory?" Birch laughed, the sound strained with exertion. "The railroads own Washington, same as they own Helena." Their deadly dance continued, neither man able to gain a decisive advantage. Blood slicked their hands, whose it was impossible to tell. Behind them, the first of Running Wolf's warriors appeared at the eastern end of the ledge, but the narrow space prevented interference. Suddenly, Birch stumbled on the uneven ground. It was the slightest of missteps, a momentary loss of balance. But in a knife fight between equals, such small errors proved fatal. Cole drove forward, his blade finding the gap beneath Birch's ribs, sinking deep into vital organs. Birch's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in grim acceptance. "Knew it would be you," he whispered, blood bubbling at his lips. "Always knew." With his last strength, Birch lunged forward, his own knife driving toward Cole's heart. Cole twisted, but not quite fast enough. The blade sliced along his side, opening a long, deep gash from ribs to hip. The two men stood locked together for a heartbeat, blood mingling as it dripped onto the rocky ground. Then Birch's legs buckled. Cole caught him instinctively, easing his former comrade to the ground. "Thornton," Birch gasped, his voice fading. "Not just smuggling. Something bigger. Army contracts, weapons." Heard him talking. His hand clutched Cole's shirt with surprising strength. "Watch the governor. He's the key." Cole frowned, trying to make sense of the dying man's words. "What are you saying, Wallace?" But Birch's eyes had already glazed over, staring sightlessly at the star-filled sky. The hangman had claimed his last victim himself. Cole closed Birch's eyes, a gesture of respect for a worthy adversary, if not a good man. Then his own wound made itself known with a surge of pain that nearly dropped him to his knees. He pressed his hand against the gash, feeling warm blood pulsing between his fingers. Running Wolf reached him, then taking in the scene with one glance. Without a word, the Blackfoot scout tore strips from his shirt, binding Cole's wound with practiced efficiency. "Bad, but not fatal," Running Wolf pronounced. "If infection doesn't set in." Cole nodded, fighting waves of dizziness. "Sarah." "Safe. My warriors escort her to Helena." Running Wolf helped Cole to his feet. "But we must hurry. More of Thornton's men come from the south." With Running Wolf's support, Cole made his way down the eastern side of the pass, where horses waited. Despite his injury, Cole insisted on riding. They had no time to waste if they were to reach Helena before Thornton realized his plans were unraveling. Dawn found them pushing eastward, Cole's wound bound but still seeping blood, his face gray with pain and blood loss. Running Wolf rode beside him, watching with growing concern. "You should rest," the scout said as Cole swayed in the saddle. The woman is safe with my warriors. She will reach Helena. Cole shook his head stubbornly. Need to be there. Birch said something before he died about Thornton the Governor Army contracts. There's more happening than we know. Running Wolf studied his friend's face, recognizing the steel beneath the pain. Then we ride, he said simply. But if you fall from that horse, I will tie you to it. Cole managed a ghost of a smile. Fair enough. Helena rose from the plains like a promise of civilization in the wilderness, a bustling territorial capital with proper streets, brick buildings, and the trappings of Eastern refinement. For Sarah Hargrove, riding in with her Blackfoot escorts, it represented the end of a desperate journey and the beginning of an uncertain reckoning. The Blackfoot warriors attracted immediate attention as they entered the town. Townspeople stopping to stare at the unusual procession. Sarah kept her head high, ignoring the whispers and pointing fingers. The brand on her shoulder, now transformed into a symbol of her own choosing, seemed to burn with renewed purpose beneath her clothing. Their destination was a solid brick building near the center of town, the words U.S. Marshal's Office painted in gold letters on the window. Sarah dismounted, thanking her Blackfoot escorts with gestures and the few words Running Wolf had taught her. The warriors would wait at the edge of town for Cole and Running Wolf, who were half a day behind. Sarah straightened her borrowed buckskins, painfully aware of her appearance, trail-worn, dirty-looking, nothing like the respectable mine owner's daughter she had once been. But that woman had died the day Thornton branded her. This new Sarah Hargrove was forged in fire and flight, stronger for the breaking. She pushed open the door to the marshal's office, blinking as her eyes adjusted to the relative dimness inside. A desk dominated the front room, behind which sat a middle-aged man with a neatly trimmed beard and the watchful eyes of a career lawman. The badge on his chest caught the light, a genuine U.S. Marshal's star. "Help you, ma'am?" he asked, his tone neutral, but his gaze assessing. Sarah took a deep breath. "My name is Sarah Hargrove. I've come to report crimes committed by Thaddeus Thornton of Bitterroot Valley, including murder, corruption, and international smuggling." And the marshal's eyebrows rose slightly, but his expression remained professional. "That's quite a list of accusations, Miss Hargrove. I'm Marshal James Harker. You have evidence to support these claims." Sarah withdrew the contract from inside her shirt, placing it carefully on the desk. "This is a contract between Thornton and Territorial Governor Wallace, detailing their smuggling arrangement. There's more evidence, much more, but this is what we managed to save." Marshal Harker examined the document with careful attention, his expression darkening as he read. When he looked up, his eyes were hard. "Where did you get this?" "Cole Blackwood took it from Thornton's office during our escape from the mine." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "My father documented Thornton's entire operation before he was murdered. This contract is just one piece of a much larger conspiracy." At the mention of Cole's name, the marshal's posture changed subtly. "Cole Blackwood. The bounty hunter." "Former bounty hunter," Sarah corrected. "He saved my life when Thornton's men tried to kill me. He should be arriving in Helena today or tomorrow if he survived Birch's ambush." "Wallace Birch." The marshal's voice sharpened. "The hangman is involved in this." Sarah nodded grimly. "Thornton hired him to track us down. He had a U.S. Marshal's badge, a false one, I assume." Marshal Harker's face darkened further. "Not false. Special deputy appointed directly by Governor Wallace 2 weeks ago." He tapped the contract thoughtfully. "Which explains a great deal." He rose, moving to a gun rack, where he selected a shotgun, checking its loads with practiced hands. "This contract alone is enough to justify an investigation, Miss Hargrove. But Thornton and the governor won't go down easily. He glanced at her. You're in danger as long as you remain in Helena. I can arrange protective custody. No. Sarah's voice was firm. I've been running long enough. It's time Thornton faced justice for what he's done to my father, to me, to countless others. Marshal Harker studied her for a long moment, then nodded with newfound respect. Very well, but you don't leave my sight until this is resolved. He strapped on his gun belt. First, we need to secure this evidence properly with witnesses. Then, the office door burst open, admitting a young deputy, his face flushed with excitement. Marshal Governor Wallace just arrived at the Grand Hotel with a whole entourage. Word is he's meeting with Army procurement officers about a major contract. Marshal Harker exchanged a glance with Sarah. Army contracts? He murmured. The pieces are falling into place. He made a quick decision. Jenkins, find Judge McCormack. Tell him I need him at the federal courthouse in 1 hour with a warrant for the arrest of Thaddeus Thornton and Governor Wallace. The deputy's eyes widened. The governor, sir? Oh, the governor, Harker confirmed grimly. And send 2 men to watch the Grand Hotel. I want to know everyone who enters or leaves that meeting. As the deputy hurried out, Harker turned back to Sarah. This goes beyond smuggling, doesn't it? What else was your father investigating? Sarah shook her head. I don't know all the details, just that Thornton was using the tunnels beneath my father's mine to move goods across the Canadian border without inspection. Opium coming south, Chinese laborers' weapons. Weapons. Harker's expression turned thoughtful. The Army's been losing shipments of rifles for months. Cases arriving half-empty, blamed on inventory errors. But if someone with access to shipping manifests was diverting those weapons, they could sell them anywhere, Sarah finished, including to hostile tribes or foreign interests. A federal crime of the highest order. Harker checked his watch. The courthouse is 2 blocks from here. We'll secure this evidence then. Again, the door opened without warning. This time it admitted Cole Blackwood, supported by Running Wolf. Cole's face was ashen, his shirt dark with blood, but his eyes were clear and focused. Cole! Sarah rushed to him, helping Running Wolf ease him into a chair. Blackwood! Marshal Harker's voice held complex emotions, recognition, wariness perhaps, a touch of respect. Been a long time. Cole nodded weakly. Harker, still wearing the star, I see. Some of us didn't throw ours away. There was an old tension between the men, history unspoken but palpable. Miss Hargrove has been telling me about your situation. Then you know what Thornton's done. Cole winced as Sarah examined his wound. But there's more. Birch told me something before he died. The governor isn't just helping with smuggling. There's something about Army weapons contracts. Something bigger. Harker nodded grimly. The governor's at the Grand Hotel now meeting with Army procurement officers. He made a decision. Change of plans. We need to move now before they conclude whatever deal they're making. I'm coming with you, Cole said, attempting to stand. Not with that wound, you're not, Sarah objected, pressing him back into the chair. She's right, Harker agreed. You'd bleed out before we reached the hotel. He turned to Running Wolf. Get him to Doc Sullivan's office. Tell the doc it's official business, he'll understand. Running Wolf nodded, helping Cole back to his feet, despite his protests. Sarah, Cole gripped her arm, his voice urgent despite his weakness. Be careful. Thornton's cornered now. Makes him more dangerous than ever. I will, she promised. Now go get that wound treated. I didn't drag you across half of Montana just to watch you bleed to death in a marshal's office. A ghost of a smile touched Cole's pale lips. Yes, ma'am. As Running Wolf led Cole out, Marshal Harker collected the contract and several deputy badges from his desk. "My men will meet us at the hotel," he told Sarah. "This won't be easy. The governor has his own security and Thornton never travels without protection." "I've faced Thornton's men before," Sarah replied, checking the revolver Cole had given her. "I'm ready." They exited the marshal's office into the bright Montana sunshine, walking briskly toward the Grand Hotel, the finest establishment in Helena, where the territory's power brokers conducted business away from public scrutiny. The hotel rose 3 stories above the main street, its facade adorned with ornate woodwork and large windows that reflected the afternoon sun. A handful of well-dressed men stood smoking on the wide front porch, while expensive carriages waited at the hitching posts. Marshal Harker led Sarah around to a side entrance where 2 of his deputies waited with grim expressions. "What's the situation?" Harker asked quietly. "Governor's in the main dining room," one deputy reported. "Private lunch with 3 army officers and Thornton himself. 4 guards outside the door, 2 of the governor's men, 2 of Thornton's." Harker nodded. "We go in fast and quiet. Show badges, not guns, unless they draw first." He glanced at Sarah. "Stay behind me until we're in the room. Once we're there, I need you to identify Thornton formally for the record." Sarah nodded, her heart pounding, but her resolve unwavering. This moment, confronting Thornton with the full authority of federal law, had driven her through every hardship of the past weeks. They entered through the kitchen, startling the staff, but preventing any warning from reaching the dining room. Moving swiftly through the hotel's back corridors, they approached the private dining area from the service entrance. The guards outside the main doors never saw them coming. By the time they realized what was happening, Harker's deputies had them covered badges displayed prominently. "Federal marshals," Harker announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Stand down." The guards professionals, recognizing the futility of resistance, raised their hands slowly. Harker nodded to his deputies to secure them, then turned to Sarah. "Ready?" She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Ready." Marshal Harker pushed open the dining room doors with confidence born of decades upholding the law. Inside, 5 men sat around a table laden with fine china and crystal glasses. Their conversation died instantly as Harker strode in, badge prominently displayed, Sarah and the deputies following. "Governor Wallace," Harker announced formally, "you and Thaddeus Thornton are under arrest for conspiracy, corruption, smuggling across international borders, and accessory to murder." And the governor, a portly man with silver hair and an expensive suit, turned pale, then red with outrage. "This is preposterous. Do you know who I am?" "I know exactly who you are," Harker replied coldly. "We have documented evidence of your arrangement with Thornton to smuggle goods through the Hargrove mine, including the diversion of army weapons." The army officers at the table exchanged alarmed glances. The senior officer, a colonel by his insignia, rose slowly. "Marshal, these are serious accusations against the territorial governor." "Yes, sir, they are, and fully supported by evidence, including a signed contract between these 2 men. Harker nodded towards Sarah. "Miss Hargrove, would you formally identify Thaddeus Thornton for the record?" Sarah stepped forward, her eyes finding the man who had haunted her nightmares for months. Thornton was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 40, with the lean, hungry look of a predator. His expensive suit and gold watch spoke of wealth, but his eyes held something darker, a cold calculation that assessed everything in terms of profit and loss. Those eyes widened slightly at the sight of her. "You," he breathed, genuine surprise in his voice. "You should be dead." "Thaddeus Thornton," Sarah said clearly, her voice steady despite the hatred burning in her chest. "This is the man who murdered my father, attempted to force me into marriage, and ordered me killed when I escaped." She pulled aside her collar, revealing the transformed brand on her shoulder. "This is his mark burned into my flesh to show his ownership." The colonel's face hardened at this evidence. "Marshal, I believe you have probable cause. Please proceed with the arrests." The governor sputtered in disbelief. "This is absurd, Colonel. Surely you don't believe—" "Save it for the judge," Harker interrupted, nodding to his deputies to secure the two men. Thornton had remained oddly calm throughout the exchange, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face. As the deputies approached, a small smile touched his lips. Not of humor, but of savage anticipation. "You've made a critical error, Marshal," he said softly. "You think I wouldn't have contingency plans. It happened with shocking suddenness." Thornton's hand moved beneath the table, emerging with a small derringer aimed directly at Sarah. "Insurance policy," he said coldly. "Miss Hargrove comes with me, or I put a bullet through her heart. Poetic, wouldn't you say? Finishing what I started at the wedding?" The deputies froze, weapons half drawn. Marshal Harker kept his hands carefully visible, his expression betraying nothing. "Think carefully, Thornton. You're surrounded. There's no way out of this hotel." "There's always a way out for men with enough money and influence," Thornton replied. He gestured with the derringer. "Miss Hargrove, to me. Now." Sarah stood motionless, a strange calm settling over her. She had run from this man, fought him, suffered at his hands. But she would not cower before him. Not anymore. "No," she said simply. Thornton's eyes narrowed. "You still don't understand, do you? You belong to me. That brand on your shoulder proves it." Sarah touched the transformed mark, now a symbol of her resilience rather than his ownership. This is mine now. Just like my life, my father's mine, and my future." She took a step toward him rather than away. "You have no power over me anymore, Thornton." Confusion flashed across Thornton's face, followed by cold rage. His finger tightened on the trigger. "Then you're of no further use to me." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The derringer's hammer fell, the small gun bucking in Thornton's hand. But Sarah, anticipating the shot, had already begun to move, dropping and rolling, as Cole had taught her during their journey. The bullet passed through the space where she had stood, embedding itself in the wall behind. Before Thornton could aim again, a new sound shattered the tension, the distinctive report of a Colt revolver. Thornton jerked backward, a look of profound surprise on his face, as a crimson stain blossomed on his chest. He looked down at it with almost childlike confusion, then raised his eyes to the doorway where Cole Blackwood stood, revolver still raised, face pale, but expression resolute. "That's for Sarah's father," Cole said quietly, "and for all the others who didn't have anyone to stand for them." Thornton opened his mouth as if to speak, but only blood emerged. He slumped forward onto the table, the derringer falling from lifeless fingers to clatter among the fine china. In the stunned silence that followed, Governor Wallace made a desperate lunge for the door, only to be intercepted by Harker's deputies. The Army officers remained frozen in place, witnesses to frontier justice in its rawest form. Cole lowered his weapon, swaying slightly. Running Wolf appeared beside him, supporting his weight, concern evident on the scout's weathered face. "Told you to stay at the doctor's," Running Wolf muttered. "Good thing I didn't listen," Cole replied weakly, his gaze finding Sarah. "You all right?" She nodded, moving to his side. "Better than you by the look of it." Marshal Harker approached Cole, his expression unreadable. For a tense moment, it seemed he might arrest Cole for the shooting. Then he glanced at the derringer on the table at Thornton's body, and at the colonel who had witnessed everything. "Clear case of defense of another," Harker said formally. "Wouldn't you agree, Colonel?" The colonel nodded gravely. "Indeed, Marshal." The suspect was about to fire again. "Your deputy had no choice." Cole raised an eyebrow at being called a deputy, but said nothing, as Harker continued. "The territory of Montana thanks you for your service, Deputy Blackwood." Harker extended his hand. "As do I." Cole hesitated, then accepted the handshake. Some old wound between them, some past grievance, seemed to heal in that moment of mutual respect. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood on the porch of a newly constructed cabin, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in hues of gold and crimson. The Hargrove mine was operational again now under her sole control, with many of the original miners returning once word spread of Thornton's death and the governor's arrest. The federal investigation had uncovered the full extent of their crimes, not just smuggling, but a complex scheme to divert army weapons to various buyers, including foreign interests that would have used them against American settlers. The new territorial governor appointed directly from Washington had promised reforms to prevent such corruption in the future. Running Wolf and his warriors had returned to their homeland, but not before helping establish new respectful trade agreements between the Blackfoot and the territory's legitimate authorities. The cavalry officer who had pursued them, based on Birch's false report, had been disciplined and new guidelines implemented for military operations near tribal lands. As for Cole Blackwood, the sound of an axe splitting wood drew Sarah's attention to the clearing beside the cabin. Cole worked methodically, his movements economic despite the recent wound. He had healed well, both physically and in less visible ways. The haunted look that had shadowed his eyes when she first met him had diminished, replaced by something approaching peace. He had stayed, helping her rebuild first the cabin, then the mine operations. They never spoke directly about the future, about what would happen once the immediate tasks were complete. Some things were understood without words. Cole paused in his work, feeling her gaze. He leaned the axe against the chopping block and approached the porch, wiping sweat from his brow. "Thinking about your father?" he asked, noting the contemplative look on her face. Sarah nodded. "He would have liked what we've done here. Honest work, fair wages for the miners, no smuggling or corruption." She smiled faintly. "And he would have liked you." "Not sure about that," Cole demurred. "I was a different man when he was alive." "We all were." Sarah touched the transformed brand on her shoulder, now a badge of honor rather than shame. "Sometimes it takes fire to forge something stronger." Cole's eyes held hers for a long moment. "Marshal Harker offered me my old job back," he said suddenly. "Full reinstatement, clean record." Sarah felt her heart sink, though she kept her expression neutral. "Will you take it?" "Told him I had other plans." Cole reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small object that glinted in the fading sunlight, a simple gold band. "If those plans align with yours." Sarah's breath caught. Cole Blackwood. "Is that a proposal?" A rare full smile transformed his weathered face. "Figured after everything we've been through, we might as well make it official." His expression grew serious. "Unless you'd rather return to civilization. I know this life isn't what you were raised for." Sarah stepped closer, taking the ring from his palm. "I was raised to recognize value when I see it," she said softly. "And some things are worth more than all the civilization in the world." She slipped the ring onto her finger, then reached up to touch his face, a face that had become as essential to her as her own reflection. Cole's arms encircled her, drawing her close, as the setting sun gilded the world in golden light. Behind them, The cabin door stood open, welcoming. Before them stretched the vast Montana wilderness, still wild and free, despite the encroaching railroads and mines. And between them, something neither had expected to find in the chaos of flight and pursuit, a future hard-won, but unbounded. "Justice served," Cole murmured against her hair. Sarah smiled, feeling the weight of the past finally lifting. And freedom earned. As darkness fell across the Montana territory, stars emerged one by one in the velvet sky. On a ridge overlooking the cabin, a lone wolf raised its voice in song, not a lament, but a celebration of wilderness and the unbreakable spirits who called it home. The end.